Before we get on with this episode, I have a few very important announcements to make. With the release of this podcast episode, the Curious Hunter series will expand its horizons to a wider variety of topics and games, generally known as the Curious series. Depending on the topic or the game discussed in each episode, the name might change to reflect that, hence the name of this episode. The Curious Gaming. More details at the end of the video. Second, this episode will cover a wide variety of topics that range from game development to community management to discussion about Monster Hunter Wilds, since my guests are fans of the series. Please make sure to check the timestamps below if you want to look into more specific questions or topics that may be more in tune with your interests. These episodes are getting longer with each iteration, and I understand that viewers want to engage mostly with what they feel, well, curious about. Lastly, let me introduce you to today's guests. As the title suggests, I have with me two insanely talented game developers that will share some incredibly valuable insight to the way that this industry works. Starting off with the rising star Kevin, game developer who works in Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds and is currently part of the team behind Idol Showdown, a 2D pixel art fighting game that recently had the Ball Bash title update. God damn, this pixel art looks good, look at this! Please go check the game on Steam, it is entirely free. Very positive reviews all across? Damn, will I have to play this? I'm a sucker for pixel art anyway, so... As for our second guest, Pedro, also known in social media as Hitman, a titan who has worked for almost a decade in the industry. He has worked in titles like Diablo 4 and not so long ago participated in the development of the upcoming game Hellclock, soon to be released on Steam this coming July 22nd, 2025. Go check the Steam page for more information about this isometric action RPG roguelike based on Brazilian folklore. I mean, if Asmongold played the demo, this gotta be good! Please go show support to these developers and their games. Thank you very much!
It is that time again. We are here with very special people. This time, I didn't focus so much on getting content creators to the platform, but instead, people that can bring a much more valuable perspective to the conversation that we've been trying to have about Monster Hunter Wilds. But not only that, this episode is going to be a bit different because I have two game developers on this episode. And if you've been paying attention to the internet, let's just say that making games is about to become, let's just say that it's going to change. Probably. We don't know anything about it yet. But if there's one thing that is true, is that while it's very easy to, make your own comments about Monster Hunter Wilds, we really don't know how these things are made. And that is why I have these two wonderful guests here. I have Hitman and Kevin, both people that have worked in game development for quite a while now, and I really value their insight and their perspective and experience when it comes to these topics. So, say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey. I'm really happy to be here.
Same.
Awesome. So, I think that as I do, well, this episode obviously is going to have some conversation about Monster Hunter, but it's not going to be the main topic necessarily this time around, because we are going to get into some aspects of game development as an industry, and hopefully that conversation can help us understand a little bit better of what exactly happened with Monster Hunter Wilds, and like how should we understand some of the, let's just say, hiccups that the whole process has had. So first, we're going to start by having a small segment where we talk about our experience related to Monster Hunter. And then we will move on to more game development related questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so starting with the typical quick fire questions. Can you introduce yourself, Pedro?
Okay. I am Pedro. I've been working in tech in general for the last 15 years, I want to say. And of those, at least 9 has been in games. I'm a very addicted gamer, and I'm kind of a nerd for the video games industry in general. I delve a lot in shit like that.
All right. What is your favorite Monster Hunter title?
Ooh, I'm a little bit torn on that right now, because for the longest time, For You was my favorite. But right now, I'm really into Wilds, and I don't know. Depending on what's coming next for Wilds, it might take the crown. But for now, it's still for you.
Awesome. Can you maybe tell me about in your opinion, what is the best Monster Hunter fight?
Ooh, that is difficult, dude, because especially when you played as many games as I did, it gets complicated because they are so different and yet so similar at the same time, right? But right now, if I would have to say one specific fight, it would be more of something that is closer to my heart than necessarily being a good fight, which is Yankutku from DOS. Just
That's
because it
very
was like my
specific.
first. Yeah, it's because it was like it is the fight that made me fall in love with the whole series.
I can see that. Yeah, if it was the fight that made the game click for you, I can completely see that. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite weapon?
Great sword, baby.
All right,
Dude,
that was
great
easy.
sword. It's the best weapon.
Okay.
I am loving IG and Switch X on Wilds, but nothing compares to great sword for me.
Okay, perfect. And for you, what is your most hated monster?
There are two. Like the one that I'm kind of a generational hater for is Mizutsune, but I also have an absolute amount of disgust for Jura Todos.
Yeah,
So-
okay. That's a solid choice. Perfect. All right, moving on to you, Kevin. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Of course, yeah. My name is Kevin. I'm a designer and an artist. I worked for Idol Showdown and Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds. I've been like in making games since 2020, so actually much shorter time than Pedro. I was shocked when he said that. So I've been making games for quite a bit less time than but yeah, those are like primarily the places that I've kind of worked on. I guess to specify a bit more on designer, I was like a gameplay designer, and then artist, I was more of like an environmental artist.
Awesome. Okay. When it comes to Monster Hunter, what's your favorite Monster Hunter title?
I'm gonna choose one, but I will say before that I love them all. I really do. I really like all the games. But if I had to pick one, probably Generations.
I'm having a lot of fun with Generation. I can finally say that I'm having fun with Generations because for the last
Yeah.
like 5 episodes before this one, everybody talks about Generations, and I'm like, oh, what is this? But yeah, it's pretty good. That's a solid choice. In your opinion, well, what's your favorite weapon?
Extremely hard to pick, but right, obviously my favorite weapon, like if I had to pick, it would be like Charge Blade. But wow, especially in World, I used almost everything. I used World Longsword, World Greatsword, World Lance, World Heavy Bowgun, like, and World Dual Blaze. Yeah, but Charge Blade is like the main weapon.
Nice. Okay.
In Wilds, I've only touched Charge Blade so far.
That's fine. I also tend to be a one weapon anti. For example, in GU, I have only played Charge Blade, with the exception of like that one time that I used Switch Axe to cheese a fight. But anyway, in your opinion, what is the best Monster Hunter fight or fights?
So I was when Pedro like said his, I was like, oh no, because I also picked Young Kutku.
That's okay. That's fine.
But my reasoning was like I guess a little different. You're gonna hear me like be very appreciative to the Monster Hunter team's like combat design and the way that they like make monsters and stuff. I really think Jan Kutku is like an incredibly well designed monster in like almost every aspect. Like the way that it introduces so many concepts to the player in like the multiple games that Yankoku is in, the way that like it teaches the player so many things, and like of course, like when Pedro said everything, I was like, of course, of course, that's the monster that made you like click because it's such a well like designed fight. It's simple but so effective, and I really like Yankutku because of that. I do want to include one like something else, which is I actually really like Alatreon because
Hell yeah.
because I really like when they mix stuff up in like different games. I understand that comes with lots of risks and stuff, but I really like when they like experiment with like different different mechanics, different ways to approach combat and stuff.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, what can you say about your most hated monster then?
Ancient Lesson and Kushala.
I mean, okay, I can see Kushala. I feel like Ancient Lesson. I mean, obviously you can hate it, and it's easy to hate. It's so out of place as a monster. Like it's just the hitboxes are terrible. You know, the fight itself is horrible when it comes to like the attack patterns. There's so much that doesn't really feel Monster Hunter that it can really take you out of it. I would say that for me is one of the main reasons why I also dislike it. But on the other hand, Kushala, yeah, a classic to dislike Kushala, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's. I'm sorry. They say anyone can cook, but sometimes.
Fair. I mean, fair.
No, but it's an interesting fight, and I appreciate like I really like the commitment to the fight. Honestly, I like the commitment that they took with Kushala, but oh boy, not great for me.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Okay, so from now on, questions are not going to be directed towards anyone in particular. So whoever feels like answering first can do so, and we'll move on, like question to question.
For sure.
So still staying on the lane of Monster Hunter and your relation with it, is there any story as to how you got hooked on Monster Hunter?
Yeah, I have one, which is like a pretty common type of story for Brazil in general. I had stumbled across like Monster Hunter 1 when I was young, and I played it, but it didn't click for me, right? At the time, it also didn't help that I did not know anything about English at all. Like, I just spoke Portuguese and that's it. But I really liked the idea of the game, the fiction, the fantasy of it, but end up falling off pretty quick. But that was when I didn't have a PlayStation 2. I was using on the one of the game stores that we had here in Brazil, so we can pay to play like an hour or so. But after a couple years, I got my own PS2, and I had only one game, which was a Japanese copy of Monster Hunter 2. I don't know Japanese, but I played that game because it was the only one I had. And the moment I fought and killed Yankutku, I got hooked for life. Like, it's going to be my whole personality from now on.
Okay.
You know?
How did you?
I almost fell
like,
off it because of Word. Not Word necessarily, but Iceborne. But went back, like 100% back in, and I am hooked again because of Wilds. So, yeah.
But like, how did you end up with a copy of Monster Hunter Dose?
Piracy, my dude.
Oh,
Who would have thought that?
I genuinely, the thing is that the way that you said it, I was like, whoa, did he like found the game or something, like in a random like garage sale, and like he was like, oh, whoa.
It was actually the game that came with my PS2, but I bought the PS2 like not on an official store or anything like that. You know, like here in Brazil, piracy at the time was really big, and it basically what made a lot of gamers from that generation. But yeah, it came with the console. It was the only one I had, and that's it.
I mean, that's the Latin American gamer origin story. Like the average gamer origin.
Actually, so true, bestie.
You know, like it's we didn't have access to a lot of stuff here, so you had to be resourceful.
For me,
let's say.
For me, it was going to the arcade and the one arcade cabinet that had 1,000 ROMs.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Such is the way of things with this. Okay, perfect. And you, Kevin, do you have a story?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely do, and of course, it's very typical, like very typical for Monster Hunter. So in my neighborhood, the 3DS, I think, is like it went on discount, and a lot of people were buying it. I finally got the chance to buy a 3DS because it was like on discount, it was cheaper. And one of the games that I got, so I got two games. I got Pokemon Y and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. And I got it with my best friend, and I was like, oh my god, this game, it looks so awesome. It's got monsters and weapons and stuff. Let's go home, let's go play it. We went back home, we both sat down, and we started playing it, and that was the worst game I've ever played. You're like, oh, this thing sucks. This is like so bad, it's so clunky. It feels like I'm in like molasses. Like, what is this? So we were both pretty disappointed, and we quickly swapped to playing Pokemon. And yeah, it was then like a couple of days passed, and then I went to my neighbor's house, and they were playing Monster Hunter 3U in their Wii U, and I was like, oh, I have that game. It's all right, and they're like, no, this game is amazing.
You don't get it.
Yeah. They were like quite older than me. And they were like, you just don't get it. And they were like, look, this game, he was like, this game, bring your 3DS. And I brought my 3DS, and at that time you can connect your 3DS to the Wii U, and you can play together, one playing on the 3DS and the other one playing on the Wii U. Yeah, you could play on the Wii U, and you could connect your 3DS to the Wii U, join a room, and I could play on my 3DS and they could play on the Wii U. So I connected, and he was like, yo, let me show you how it's done. And after that, I would go to his house literally every day to play the game. And yeah, and we eventually cleared Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. And it was like, yeah, after that,
damn, that's a jump.
It was over. Then, Monster Hunter 4U came out, and Monster Hunter Generations, and so on and so forth.
That is such a cool story, though, because it's not uncommon to hear stories from people that find like this player on a lobby, and they are like this seasoned veteran, and they show you the ropes, and you get hooked on the game. And part of how cool and maybe treasured that experience becomes is the reason that you had somebody there to teach you stuff, right? It's not only that you understood the game, is that there was somebody that taught you like some things, and you even had the opportunity to have that experience, with like in person, like in real life.
It was different, bro. Like,
that's pretty cool.
I remember going to college, and everybody had at the time Monster Hunter 4U came out. My guy, I would go to different parts of the university to like sit down with people and play Monster Hunter 4, and like we would like connect with our 3DSs, and certain people needed this, certain people needed that. So you had to like speak with different groups.
Okay. You kind of had the experience that was intended in a way, because in Japan, you know how the game was designed considering the fact that people would commute from, their homes to their jobs or their schools, and they can sometimes, meet up in the street and start playing together just with random people. And it worked pretty well over there. But what we had, for example, on the West, it was for a lot of people a much more isolated experience. Not so much 100%. A social thing.
It was kind of like that for me too. But because it was a very specific window in time where I was like in college / university or whatever, that a lot of people were playing that game. Plus, Monster Hunter 4U at that time already had online, so it wasn't as necessary. But there was still like a very big like community that was like doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, well, so I know the answer to, for this question from Pedro, but I still want him to answer. Have you guys enjoyed Wilds?
Yes. Next question.
Okay.
Yes, I have enjoyed it so much as well. Like, I've had a absolute blast. I have had crashes. I have had performance issues. I have had like all these things, which yes are like things that have especially when it crashes in the middle of an investigation. That has frustrated me because I lose the investigation, and it's happened to me too many times. But generally speaking, I love this game. This game is so good.
Yeah, I think it's worth to point out that I am loving the game. I really am. It's already one of my favorite games ever. Not even just Monster Hunter, but on the 3 platforms I usually play on, I have not like encountered any issues. Like performance is good. I had 0 crashes so far. So for me, it's different. Maybe if I had a lot of issues, I would not love it as much as I am loving it right now. But
Yeah. You gotta
moving
pass me
that
some of that.
aside,
Yeah.
I love
Pass
it.
me some of that luck.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about performance eventually, but just to give a little bit of perspective, would you guys mind sharing a little bit of the details on your rig? Like, what is the graphic card that you're running? What is the CPU? Stuff like that that can maybe give more context as to what kind of system is giving you what kind of experience.
I just want to make
Only-
sure I give the correct information.
Only
One
if you
sec.
want.
Oh no, for sure. I can share a bit. At this my main one is a desktop. I have a 4080 Super and i9 12900K. So it's a pretty beefed up rig, so it's a good one. I had no issues there. But I'm also playing it on a laptop which has if I'm not mistaken, a 12th generation i5 and a 4050 RTX 4050. And the last one I'm playing on is the ROG Ally, the handheld. And I'm also playing there like with almost no issues. It looks like a pixel art game almost, but it runs. Yeah.
My rig, I would say it's kind of like a mid tier, I guess. I don't know. I have a 3070 Ti, and I have an i5 Intel i5 12600K, 32 gigs of RAM, and yeah. I don't know if another information is needed. I guess.
No, I don't think so. And in
yeah,
fact, I'm
that's like-
asking. I'm asking this question mostly for the public, because you guys are giving out those details, and I have no idea what you're like even saying. I've never been too much into like stats or just computer parts, and I'm not big on that. I don't really understand them a lot, but I know that a lot of people do care about them today, and I thought it could help give more context. I guess just to put it out there, I'm playing Wilds on a ROG Zephyrus 14. I cannot really say the specific version because I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't remember the specifics, but at least with the computer model, you can get a reference of what I'm using to play Monster Hunter Wilds, and I have to play it on like all minimal graphic settings and stuff like that, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible for me.
I'll give you a hint about this as well. Sometimes it's better to bump up the settings a little bit, because if you put everything really low, you're going to have a higher load on the CPU, and it's ideal to try to balance it a little bit, because then the load is going to be a little more spread between CPU and GPU. I don't know if that's going to happen on Wilds specifically, but a lot of games I tend to play do help a lot, specifically Star Citizen. So yeah,
That's really weird. Like increasing the graphics so that you reduce the load on the CPU. That's so weird.
yeah, because if you look at it, it looks weird, but at the same time, you have to understand that a lot of processes are dealt by both of them. Like if you have the graphics card, the GPU not working as much, then you have a lot more stuff for the CPU to process. If you have a lot of stuff that your card still has to process and shit, then that thing that the graphics card processes then goes to the GPU. So it kind of does a little bit of combined work there. If you
All right.
lower everything too much, then the CPU, then the GPU will process everything really fast, and then the CPU will get a little bit bottlenecked, you know?
Wow. Well, this is how you can see that I'm not really tech savvy. But anyway, moving on to the next question then. Where do you find the fun in the game? You know, in Monster Hunter in general.
You want to go ahead first, Kev?
Sure. I'm mostly always like kind of giving you the window because I'm always like, oh, I should be respectful, you know. Anyways, yeah. So besides, it's like a mix. So like, the fun for me in the game is primarily the combat, so like weapon mastery, things like that. The second thing I would say, monster pattern like mastery. I really like knowing like how the monsters behave and like mastering that. I mean, that's kind of the whole point. And then the last thing, the third thing would be fashion. Like that's like in that like order, I would say. So weapon mastery, monster pattern, and then fashion. Those are the three things I would say I enjoy or like have a lot of fun with in the game.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's everything, honestly. Like I like almost everything about the game. And that goes for like almost every game that I really do enjoy, but for Wilds and Monster Hunter in general, the combat is the main thing for sure. I was also never that much into the fashion aspect of the games until Wilds because the layered weapon and armor systems are so much more now and easier to get into. So I find a lot of fun there. But the main thing that I do right now that made me get to 800 hours of Wilds so far is the world of the game. Like I do something that I understand not a lot of people do, which is I hop on the Windward Plains and I walk around it, hunt everything I want, grab a lot of stuff, then move on to the forest, do the same thing, then go to the basin, do the same thing, and go until I reach Wyveria. And I do that like 2-3 times a day, which takes around 3 hours or something.
Oh, you
And
do like a
that
tour.
is, yeah. I do it almost every day.
Damn,
Yeah.
okay.
And that is really fun for me. And yeah, I think a bit it's because of how I started playing Monster Hunter because I didn't have the multiplayer experience when I started on those. And that kind of made me like to play alone that way a lot for most of the games.
Perfect, okay. All right, well, can you, in your own words, describe the identity of the game?
Ooh, that's a hard one. You want to start, Kev?
It's a big question. Yeah, it's a really big question. First of all, it's like the question itself. What are we talking about? The game, as in Wilds, or the series?
I would say mostly the series, because I think that while Wilds offers, you know, the Monster Hunter experience, I would think that you can find more in the franchise as a whole that can help you define what is it exactly that identifies this game, and also why is it that Monster Hunter works. And then there has been opportunities where people have tried to do like they have tried to make a Monster Hunter like, and it hasn't worked, right? So there's obviously something about Monster Hunter that has to be particularly special that holds it to its own identity as a franchise.
Okay. I think obviously the people that can best describe the identity of Monster Hunter is gonna be the developers themselves, but I can make my own assessment, I guess, as in like personal assessment, like what I think. I think that what's interesting about a series with such a long legacy is that the identity, it's not that it changes, but it's like fluid. Um they might do the same things like in every game, but to different degrees, and they kind of like, you know, experiment in different ways. However, if I had to like narrow it down, like the main appeal, firstly, it's the monsters. That's the essence and everything that surrounds them. So I think something that the team does really well is that identity of the monster sort of spreads into every single other facet of the game. So the environment, the tools at the player's disposal, and the tools themselves that are part of the monster itself. In a mechanical sense, right? Because I tend to see things this way, I guess. The identity is that the player has a set of tools, and the monster is a set of tools. If you boil it down, it's a set of tools. It's a set of tools that is made to, prevent you from progressing into getting access to more tools. And that progression is very important. As you've said, other games have done that progression, but I think what definitely sets Monster Hunter apart is the world and the way that they crafted the world. I mean, I own the Monster Hunter illustrations book, and I don't own. I think there's 2 parts. I have the first part, and right away when you see their initial designs, there's very clear intent, and everything's kind of explained there. I feel like people have already explained this a lot, but the world of Monster Hunter is unique in the sense that it's a strange meld of fantasy, but that can be believable or has the feeling of being believable.
All right, so maybe there's a little bit of there's an X factor behind the world building, and it's difficult to call it world building because lore in Monster Hunter can be extremely vague, and yet it seeps into different elements of the gameplay and the interactions with the monsters. Well, we cannot talk about lore in Monster Hunter without talking about ecology, of course, and I think the devs being so mindful about how charming having that layer can be, I think they really leaned into that in order to make the players, have this suspension of disbelief a little bit with the monsters,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
for
agree.
sure. Before Pedro, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's like you say, this one is also a hard one because honestly, I feel that there's not really a right answer for that. Like the developers might have a specific thing in mind, but the identity will vary a lot from person to person and how they play, right? But for me, if I had to put into a simple term, it would be the identity of Monster Hunter is study and learn the monster to become the monster. That basically it. You learn how the monster moves, you learn how the monster fights, you learn about the environment the monster is in, so eventually you can beat that monster, understand how to move around the place he lives, and you get his gear and go on to hunt other things using that monster gear. You basically become the monster, so that is the identity of the game for me. And if I would put into a visual way, I think one thing that translates very well that feeling and that thing for me is the open cinematic for Monster Hunter 2. It's basically that. And
isn't that the
in
one
my
where
view,
they show the
What?
monsters hunting the Rathian, and then they go back to the camp, and they show the artisans
Yeah,
crafting the armor,
exactly.
sewing the different scales of the Rathian into that trailer to
And
me is cinema. It's pure Monster Hunter.
And that is why I like Wild so much, because there's even things on that trailer that only happens in Wilds, which is the power clash, And in my feeling and in my view and how I feel about Wilds is the culmination of all the ideas that we see in that cinematic, So
Nice. Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Perfect. Okay, well, is there anything that you enjoy or that you really like about Monster Hunter besides the combat? You have already mentioned some things, but I'm wondering if you can go into more detail about the things that are not the most evident or the most frequently liked things, which is the combat.
I'll go ahead on this one, right, Kev?
Go for it.
To me, the combat is the most important thing, of course, but I like to kind of live in the world, like see the things that happen around the map, cooking, crafting, camping, the whole preparation aspect that even though a lot of people say it's either irrelevant or doesn't exist anymore, I feel like everything you do in that game is a preparation for the combat at the end of the day. And those preparations are a lot of stuff, like a lot of gameplay related stuff that I like it so much. So yeah, crafting equipment, cooking, camping, gathering, all that is really really good for me.
Perfect. And you, Kev?
Yeah, I have a similar answer. I would say I really love gathering and the preparation aspect. I think similar to Pedro in the sense that like a lot of people criticize like I guess the preparation aspects of like the way that they've changed and stuff. I actually think that in Wilds is it's definitely become, I would think, a bit more engaging for me. I like going out like Pedro does all the time. I don't do it all the time, but when I do go out of the camp into the map, I have like objectives to like go grab these things and like and explore. And I actively, for instance, I actively don't use my sacred because first of all, for me, it's actually a bit hard to grab stuff with the sacred within this when I'm on the sacred. So I just kind of like don't do that. But generally speaking, right, it's the guy. I really do like the gathering aspect, especially in these more modern games. I do think that like in the older games, it was a bit like not as adventurous in my opinion. Like in Wilds, it feels like you're kind of heading off into like a little adventure to grab a couple items and stuff. It feels nice.
Yeah.
The last thing is atmosphere. Wow, this game is like Wilds, I mean, but a couple of other games have had this atmosphere that I'm like, wow, this is so good. It's a world that feels really, really alive, and it makes me want to live there.
Yeah, sometimes people like they undervalue the level of immersion that the game manages to achieve, even if you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite like moments in Wilds was actually just spotting a Wraithen in the Scarlet Forest when it was raining. Like it looks like a silhouette and it looks like so like dangerous, I guess, and the only thing you see is the reflection of their eyes when it's like
Okay.
pouring rain.
Yeah, nice.
It's beautiful. Like I'm like, whoa, it's like cinematic.
Perfect. Well, this is gonna be the last question about Monster Hunter for this episode. What are your impressions on Laggy and Steve for Wilds?
Go ahead, Pedro.
I love them. I love them so much. Dude.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Yeah, they were cooking with this.
Yeah. I mean, Laggy, I'm not that much of a widow, because a lot of people have been asking for Laggy like since forever. I was not amongst those people, but now that I have him in Wilds, dude, it's so good. I like even the one the underwater section. I have fun playing that, and I did not have fun playing the underwater combat in its original iteration. So I really like him. And Seregios, dude, it's a dream come true matchup against the Greatsword, against Wild's Greatsword specifically. So there's no way I wouldn't love him.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember seeing some of your like screenshots of like 14 offsets, 16 offsets. So yeah, must be nice. And you, Kev?
I feel like such a nerd, bro. Because like when I was going against Laggy and then Seregios, I was definitely like fascinated by their addition. I think they've been, in my opinion, the best additions they've done like in the game, like post the base game.
Oh yeah.
I think they're like incredibly designed in multiple aspects. Like mechanically speaking, Lagiacrus is like, I don't know how they say Lagiacrus in the name, but I've always said Lagiacrus, so
Yes, whatever. This is
that's
not the
how
place.
it's staying.
Yeah, it's not gonna matter here.
Yeah, but it's such a I think people really undervalue like the uniqueness of the Leviathan structure, which they've said they've had a lot of issues kind of implementing. It really does offer like really unique gameplay interactions, and this is like taking the water section without taking it into account. The movements are very slippery, and I think that allows for very interesting and dynamic movement. So, for instance, I like to compare Lagiacrus with Misutsune because Lagiacrus is less about precision and like more about large sweeps and slams. They're like less agile but more oppressive. They're kind of like on top of you like all the time. Misu doesn't have like super crazy like AoEs. Like Lagiacrus has the whole fence that they like call it the electric fence they do when they like do the roar and whatnot. But Misu's like more deliberate in the way that it engages with the player, more precise. So I really like comparing the two, and if you like take the time to like look at the differences between those two monsters, I think you're gonna see like such like an impressive display of the interesting mechanisms that you can build around that body structure in particular. And I think they really took advantage of that with the slipperiness that they made these two Leviathans and stuff in this game really well. So when it comes to Seregios, I think it's masterful. It's like a masterful monster to teach you about the emphasis of turns. So like, when do I get to attack and when do I get to react / defend? Its mobility is like so good. Like Seregios' mobility is so good that it forces players to take a more careful approach. And combined with the claw scratches that it does downwards, it's like subtly chipping away at your health if it catches you and stuff. It's a very, I think, interestingly designed monster, especially with the intro, because I believe that monster introduced bleeding. And Seregios in this game, has very, very, very long turns. I call them turns, but it's like they are constantly striking at you, leaving very little breathing room until at the end it kind of leaves a very big opening for the player once it's like done attacking and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it teaches the player like a lot about what turns are in the game and like how you have to like respect turns and stuff.
Yes. Okay. So now we're going to move on to questions that are more related to game development, but in hopes of bringing some clarity to the whole mess that has been Wild's release and some of the difficulties that the game has had to establish a more solid reception with people, right? So the first question that I have for you guys, before we get into the actual technical aspects of that, is I would like you guys to talk a little bit about your experience as a game developer. Like, what have you worked on? What are the different aspects of the industry that you know of, stuff like that, just to give some context to the viewer as to like what is your background and what insight can you bring. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you start, Kev?
Yeah. So you said you wanted to know more about like the experience.
Yeah. What's your background as a developer? Like, what have you worked on? Stuff like that.
Okay. So I might have said this previously, but I've worked on a couple of games, like two. I think I've done some other things like on the side, but I don't really count them, I guess. I primarily worked on Idol Showdown, which was started as like a fan project, but then kind of became like a really big thing. It's a fighting game, and I initially was brought on as an environment artist because they didn't have anybody to make art for the stages. But I then transitioned into being part of the design team. And that's kind of what I ended up doing until the game's not released, but like after because after release we had like a couple more patches adding other stuff, and I helped regarding balance and things like that when it came to that. So I have experience in that sort of PvP fashion. The other game that I worked on was Phantom Breaker, It's a 2D beat 'em up, and I worked primarily as a contracted artist there.
Nice. I like beat 'em ups. They have become a bit of an outdated genre, but Final Fight, Battletoads, those games were really good for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. Yeah. So like I worked as a contractor there. And yeah, that's currently I would say what I am confident saying that I've had experience in.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
And you, Pedro?
It's a lot. Like there is a big issue about what I've worked on because I've mostly worked in outsourcing, and like 99% of the stuff that I worked on I can't speak about because of NDAs and stuff like that.
Classic.
There are some that I can talk about, yeah, but mostly not mostly. I worked on games like for every major company and also a lot of smaller companies. I worked on games for mobile, for PC console, for
So
Nintendo.
you said you cannot
all that.
say, for example, like the games that you worked on, but can you give names of companies at least?
Yeah. That I can do. Like, I can say some games, like a more recent one, and I guess the only one that is AAA that I can speak about is Diablo 4. I
Damn.
worked
Let's go.
mostly on 3D art for characters there, but not in production itself. I was leading a team of 3D artists that was working on like armor sets and like horse armor and a lot of stuff for the in-game store, you know. I also worked kind of recently on another action RPG, but this one actually is Brazilian, which is Hell Clock, which recently was on one of those Steam Snacks Fest and all those things. Like the demo was released, and it's an amazing game. I worked with my team with basically the whole 3D art for characters in that game and a lot of animation as well.
Sorry, question. Can we still get the demo in Steam if I wanted to check it out?
I think so. Let me check it, but I think
maybe
so.
something to talk about after the podcast. Yeah, but it really intrigued me anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I worked on a lot of games that I can't speak about. Some games that I worked on are not even like announced yet, so I can't speak much on it. But my experiences specifically is kind of spread around a lot of the areas inside of game development, right? Because I started as a game designer, then I leaned a little bit more on 3D art. But after a while, because I knew a little bit about every single area, I started working on a more leadership position. So I started as a producer after a while, worked as a producer for quite a bit of time. And then I transitioned to team manager and then creative manager. So I kind of have experience in production,
Kinda.
executing stuff. I kind of have experience in leading production, and I also have experience in managing. So
That's a whole career, my dude. Like come on.
almost 10 years now. So yeah, it's kind of a lot. And in outsourcing, which is what the industry I worked on, you kind of have to assume a lot of different roles at sometimes even all at the same time, you know. And which is also good because in outsourcing you end up working in a way more diverse setting in terms of like you don't work in one game at a time most of the times. You are working like simultaneously in like 3 games, and sometimes it can be like a triple A, a double A, and an indie game at the same time.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm getting the impression from the things that you have both said that it comes with the job that you sometimes have to fulfill different roles and be very flexible and adaptable to the needs of the different projects.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
unless 100%. You work on like a really big studio, and that is where you usually get to specialize in something. Like Santa Monica Studios, for instance, have some artists that are specifically working on breakable objects, you know. So
Okay,
You get
interesting.
to specialize a lot when you get to like those higher levels in studios that own their own IPs and stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, that I mean, thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's very insightful. Let's get into the nitty gritty then. First question when it comes to what kind of insight you can give about this topic. Monster Hunter, as we know, has had many problems with performance. It was not even like a one-time thing. I mean, it's actually something that has been going on for a while now, even after all the patches and all the fixes. Do you have a diagnosis as to why is performance such a prevalent issue in the game?
Hmm. That is a hard one. Because first of all, I did not like dig too deep into this because as I said, like my 3 devices that I play it on are working fine with the game.
Oh,
But
I mean,
if I had
it's okay if
no, go
you
ahead.
don't have like, because obviously I'm assuming that to have that actual information you must have worked in the game first of all. But any
Yeah.
kind of like perspective, opinion, theories that you can bring up to the conversation are very valuable anyway. So anything you
Yeah.
can say
Yeah.
about this
Of course.
works for
Of
me.
course. If I were to guess, I would say it's again a combination of a lot of different factors, right? But I would say the main one is that this is the first, as far as I know, the first game that the Monster Hunter team is working for this new generation. And also, in combination with that, the first open world one. So you have a lot of things on the world in the game like that. The world is very busy, very detailed. There's a lot happening that you actually only see if you play like I do. Uh, so every single thing there is more load, like more load for the CPU, more load for the GPU, memory, all that stuff. So that kind of introduces a lot of different challenges for a team that is not used to doing open world games, and it's basically their first game for this generation. And in combination with that, there's also a lot of stuff that don't translate really well for PC right now. Like direct storage is one of the technologies they use, right? Which it it's like known that is causing a lot of issues for the game ever since release. And it's a technology that is still a little bit behind on PCs in comparison to console,
Can you give a little
especially
bit of
PlayStation.
context as to what that what do you call it? It was something storage?
It is direct storage.
Oh, direct storage. What
It's
does it do
yeah,
more or less, like in simple terms?
it it skips some steps. Let's say instead of processing something on the GPU, then to the memory, then to the CPU and all that, it goes straight from the SSD to the GPU, right? So some things are processed faster because of that. You kind of skip some steps, so it makes it a little easier to load huge stuff like really big assets and textures and stuff like that. But that works very well on PlayStation because of its hardware and how the SSD is made on that system. On PC, it works, but it has a lot of like middlemen. You have the manufacturers and the specific parts you have Windows and how Windows deal with that. So there's a lot of stuff in the way to make that thing that work properly on PC. And Capcom also is not as good as implementing with direct storage specifically because I'll give an example in Linux. The more recent patch broke a lot of people's games because they cannot launch the game anymore because they updated direct storage on
Damn.
Linux. So
Damn.
you have
Okay.
to downgrade to an older version of direct storage for the game to work there. So
I'm
that is one of the things.
yeah, I'm getting kind of the feeling that it's a technology that still needs a little bit of work to actually be implemented in PC gaming in general.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that's the hard part, right? Like you're not developing just for console anymore. It's now actually a multi-platform game, and
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end
yeah.
of the day, you can't scrap that type of technology because it's so integral to the design, or if you do scrap it, you kind of have to deal with a lot of other limitations. So it's hard. It's hard work. It's a lot of hard stuff to develop for, especially new generation.
For sure, yeah. What can you say about this, Kev?
Yeah, so I honestly don't have much to say that has already been said. However, I would like to touch on like a little subject regarding the engine and stuff. Like, I think I see a lot of people kind of discussing things like that, like engine and X and Y and whatever about the engine, and the engine is good at this and the engine is bad at that and whatnot. And I think it's I think it's a bit of a generalization, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it kind of does a bit of a disservice to the people that like, take the time to understand how to use these tools and create these experiences. Not sure if this is a good example, but I want you to think of a traditional painter. They use different brushes and different paint and a different canvas texture for their different paintings, right? All engines use, in essence, the same quote unquote tools. But the painter buys two colors, for instance, from different brands, like to give an example. And they might be the same color, but the way that they achieve that color might be different. And at the end of the day, it's like what makes the art is the tools. So you can achieve everything with the tools that you are given, but however it's like, how do I explain this? It's like you have a set of tools, but understanding the tool is a different beast, I guess, and like applying the tool in different circumstances is a different thing. I think me and Pedro talked about something, it was a pretty long time ago, about even if you're like taking an asset of a game that was made in the same engine, even the same version, and putting it like somewhere else, like that uses the same engine, the same version. There's like so many things that you need to take into account with these different tools because they were used differently by the person that was using the tool. That's kind of what I want to bring forward, which is like I just see too many people saying like this game was made in Unreal. That means it's gonna run really badly. This game was made is an open world in RE Engine. That means blah, blah, blah. And I think it's quite a general statement. And I also think that it's important to say, like Pedro kind of said this. This is why I'm like kind of said everything, which is like developers are in the process of learning many things. Like while they make World, while they make Wilds, while they made Sunbreak and Ricebreak and stuff. This is them learning. Whether people like that or not, it's like that's kind of the process of creation. And yeah, that's why that's kind of what I want to bring forward when it comes to like
Right.
I'll add
stuff.
one thing about
yes.
this engines stuff because it's really like Kevin said, but I'll also add that you can get the same engine and make a pixel art side-scrolling game and Monster Hunter Wilds, right? The engine is not what is necessarily dictating the game or what can work in the game or what you can add to the game or even what you can do necessarily, especially when it's an in-house engine where they have every power to just make more stuff for it, make it work with more things, So when people talk about engines, I can understand in a way because when a lot of games release by that same engine and out games have that same kind of problem, you kind of does that 1 + 1 equal 2 and you say it's an engine problem. Okay, I can understand people saying that, but it's much more complicated than that.
Interesting. obviously, I think this is getting into a very technical level if we really want to be able to understand it, like especially from the perspective of the consumer or the general public. I wouldn't blame people for believing that the presence of the same engine would lead them to conclude that, the devs are tinkering with things that shouldn't have been tampered with, maybe, simply because the RE engine is applied into the development of, for example, Rise, and then I think at some point they used like a previous version of the RE engine for World, and so everybody assumes that because they made those two things work, that Wilds should be working perfectly, when it's not particularly the case, really. Right?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's much more than just engine. Like every single
it's not
project
defined
that
only
team-
by the engine.
No, yeah, but like every single project that a team takes on, no matter your level of experience, the development is chaotic. Like things change, like from one moment to another, for many reasons, and there are limitations that appear, issues that arise that there's no way you can predict them until they happen. There's a lot of that too, I feel like. And yeah, it's just
Yeah. Two projects from like even the same team on the same engine, same version of the engine will have complete different problems, complete different performance issues. It's like engine, it's not like the reason for everything. Engine is just that, an engine, a tool for you to do the work to create the project. What goes into it is where the problems might arise, and all that thing.
exactly.
Okay.
It's like, for instance, Zune, when you make a video, it's like you might, I don't know how many videos you've made, but you've probably made a lot of videos. I am certain, absolutely certain, that you probably thought you had something down. And when you went to make another video, something very strange happened that you now have to like figure out. Like, what? I've done this 50 times.
Yeah, I mean,
What?
I think I've had a little bit of that, mostly when I try to experiment with new things. And I'm obviously I go from the impression that, because I've done this like more controlled, reduced version of what I want to do now, it's going to be simple, and it's not. Yeah.
I just wanted to. I'm trying to like make it. I guess like
visualizable
relate to it?
for the viewer. Yeah.
Yeah, I like relate to it. I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
No, yeah, and I really appreciate that, because it's not everybody is going to be able to understand these things from your perspective. There has to be some way that we can kind of like make people understand that when we talk about engines, when we talk about optimization, things are not clear cut. Obviously, there's a lot more in between. And even for developers themselves, or for people that are working in programming, even I know the meme that, sometimes people have a code. The code works. Do not touch the code, because we actually don't know how it works. It just works. There's a lot of like black box elements sometimes when it comes to development. And, it's part of the industry. If it works, people try to run with it. Because even trying to improve on somebody else's code can be messy and chaotic, and it can really mess things up. So, well, obviously this is not a very simple conversation either, because yes, we can say, all right, so the developers have maybe not really managed to apply the things that they have learned from previous installments into Wilds. The problem that I've seen, the problem that I've seen now, however, is that Wilds released, everybody understood that it had a performance problem. The devs and also Capcom themselves acknowledged these things, and then they went, yeah, we're going to work on it, we're going to try to solve it. Title Update 1 comes around. The stupid shader cache thing happens, right? Where everybody had to compile shaders again. Sure, okay. Solution that is, it's an easy solution that people were able to figure out. I am of the opinion that the consumer shouldn't be the one figuring out these things. Anyway, that happens. For the most part, people can still play the game. We go to Title Update 2. Somebody finds out that if you have the high resolution texture pack on the game, installed, that is messing up your performance. The game is somehow loading that thing on the background for no reason, even if you're not toggling it on. But because you have it installed, it is still considered in the process of the processes of the game. So somebody figures that out. People start communicating. They say delete the high resolution texture pack if you're not going to be using it, because it is taking away some resources from your PC. So that other thing happens, and it's like this constant, like, I don't want to like speak in deterministic terms, because it seems that Capcom, or at least the Monsanto devs, are working extremely hard to continue to optimize and fix these issues, right? But it's always something that comes up. We keep discovering layers of problems, and I would think it's not up to the consumer to be solving these things. So when these things happen, what is the best way for companies to address these problems, or to be able to, meet the consumer or the player in the middle somehow with these issues?
That is a difficult one, because the reaction is correct, right? Like, it released title update 1 with the shader compilation problem and all that. The reaction people have is correct, but it's the same. I'm not there. I'm not working on the game, so I can't say that for sure. But my opinion is, because I've been through something like this before, is the same type of frustration people are having, the devs are having. Because why is this happening? It shouldn't happen.
That's perfect,
like,
actually.
Dude, we didn't even touch on this. Why is this happening now? Like, that is something that happens a lot. And it's even worse. It's even more difficult when you're dealing with something that is already released, because you have another build. Usually you have a lot of different branches of builds in when you are developing the game. But when you release, you have another branch. So each branch of development, each build has some different stuff on it that sometimes we don't even know are there. And when we post it and publish it and the update goes live, there's only so much testing we can do. And when you deploy for 10 million people, you are going to find a lot more stuff that you couldn't find before, because there's just no way you can test to the same level,
Interesting. So, this is very good perspective.
It's really hard to guarantee a lot of stuff when you are talking about performance and bugs and stuff like that, because it's so hard to test. And when the game goes live, is even harder to do so. So yeah, how to communicate that is the issue. And I think we are going to delve a little bit more into this later. But yeah, communication is hard, because the hate is going to happen no matter what. If the problem exists, it doesn't matter the intention or lack thereof. There is going to be hate. There's going to be backlash.
It becomes a fire immediately. It's not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to say that, as a player and as a developer, it frustrates me just as much. I love the game as much as everybody does. So and I have played the series for a really long time. So when I see that these things are happening, of course, it's kind of frustrating, because I want to play the game, of course. And like Pedro said, I know that we're going to delve into this probably more later on. But again, I don't work there. I don't know their circumstances, their situations. You have to keep in mind, this is the sequel to Capcom's biggest game ever. So there's a lot of stuff in the background. And what I want to say is that if I was there, I would probably say the same things as many people say all the time. We should release the game later, or if we knew about issues beforehand and things like that. Every developer, if you ask every developer, do you want more time so that you can make this better? They will always say yes.
Most
likely. They will always say yes.
Yeah, I guess at some point it becomes this conversation. It's pretty much like with artists sometimes, where it's very difficult to know when the painting is finished. But at some point you also need to know when it's good enough, right? Maybe the problem that we're having right now is that, Capcom, or, well, the Monster Hunter devs were really trying to make an effort to have a product that is good enough, and then a lot of problems started happening, which didn't make the public have the impression that it was good enough. I think we can agree that it is good enough, right? It's just that feeling is getting lost between all the like shitstorm that has happened in between. But anyway, perfect. So, this is going to be more or less on the same line, but there's many aspects of Monster Hunter Wilds that make it seem like an unfinished game, quote unquote unfinished game. Would you agree with that statement?
Want to go ahead, Kev?
Sure. I think that the perception of like an unfinished game comes from many different factors that like mainly revolve around what I call legacy features. So when a game, of course, like I guess like a good example is like Pokemon. Like eventually Pokemon was gonna not include all Pokemons. If the roster keeps growing, it's kind of crazy, but whatever. Kind of like that type of logic where there's a lot of features and suddenly something's not there that the game has. I believe a very common thing was like that the Gathering Hub wasn't there when the game launched. One can argue like in terms of technological performance that maybe it is. I don't like how I said that. Technological performance, what am I?
You're good.
I think I think it gets trickier when we talk about the content within the game. Because what do you like kind of consider like a finished game? And the structure of the game, do they want there might be an intent to change that structure of the game and whatever. It's like it's complicated. But yeah, generally speaking, as someone that's a player that has played multiple games, I could have assumed that, but there is technically like an ending, a credits or whatever. And I know it's low rank, and a lot of people say high ranks when the game starts and all that. But yeah, my take is like I really don't know. I really don't know personally.
Okay, maybe it's difficult to identify that, considering like, well, especially considering the perspective that you can have from a developer's perspective. I do
because
I do want to comment on what you said about legacy features, because at some point I'm not sure if I heard or read, I probably read somebody saying that the Gathering Hub not being on the game from the get-go could have been a design decision, which you can make that argument, but it would be a very weird one in my opinion. So in that line, I think that the problem that a lot of people are having is there have been situations where we haven't seen legacy features in the game, and it's very difficult to give the benefit of the doubt to the developers that they didn't want to put in the game as a design decision. That kind of like that trust, or maybe that that willingness to give the benefit of the doubt has been very difficult to build this time around, where I believe that in other circumstances, in previous installments, I don't know, it was probably a lot easier to kind of convince people of that. But because of how rocky everything has been with WAD specifically, I feel like that's not the case this time around. But is their argument at least defendable? Do you think that this could be actually a design decision that has meaning or is like significant to the experience?
Yes.
Probably need a minute to think about that. But Pedro, can you go?
Yes. And I'll take this also to talk a little bit about my perspective about the unfinished game stuff. Initially, I would say that this perception of unfinished really fades away when you move away from the internet, honestly, like at least in my experience. And especially if you talk to newcomers to the series, right? I had the privilege of playing with 5 people that had Wilds as their first Monster Hunter. And unfinished was never something that went through any of the conversations, right? So I agree with Kevin when he say that this, at the end of the day, boils down to a lot of like legacy features missing and veterans complaining about it, which makes sense. And also a little bit about narratives that are created or around data mining, right? I don't even think data mining itself is bad, or because I happen to love data mining and reading through data mine stuff, but I think it's more of a problem of that. So old players complaining that legacy features are not there, narratives that are created around data mining and stuff. And why I think the hub not being there can and most likely is a design decision is, well, the fact that when you look at wilds and you play wilds, at what point does the hub seems to be so integrated into the experience, considering especially the fact of a newcomer playing the game, right? If it was something that was so integral to the game that it not being there immediately feels weird, something is missing, I would agree that maybe it's not the case, maybe it wasn't this a design choice. But playing wilds from start to finish, like twice that I did, like I created 2 new characters as well, to go through the whole thing. A hub is never a feature that I feel like it should, like the lack of it is not something that I felt impacted by, you know? So I think it's extremely plausible that is a design decision for them to not add it on release and only on title updates, because it's really integrated into the title update stuff with the festivals and stuff, because it's the only place in the game where the festivals actually change anything, right? So
Yeah.
that
think
is my
they-
perspective on that.
I think that adding on to like what you said, like the gathering hub could be considered like, this is like, not saying, because I don't think that Monster Hunter particularly fits into the definition of like live service necessarily. I think that it's kind of like a very broad term, but they wanted the gathering hub to be that, like, this is like this component. In fact, when I started playing the game, obviously the gathering hub was not there. I thought there wasn't gonna be a gathering hub. I thought that the
Same.
new multiplayer concept that they were bringing with this game was like the whole like environmental link type stuff and like questing in like big lobbies, and like the lobbies are distributed through the different camps and whatever.
Yeah.
I thought that was like the original intent, because you see it in Monster Hunter. I'm gonna reference now another cinematic, which I think it's like Monster Hunter 4 trailer. The one where they introduce Seregios for the first time. They're in the desert. They're like preparing to leave, and then they leave. They see the Diablos and they fight it. It kind of had like a vibe to like that, where groups of people conglomerate in like a camp, and then they just head out on teams and stuff without having like a central place for them to like.
Yeah.
You have to understand that like something that I really appreciate about the Monster Hunter team is that they have really strong visions. Like when they want to do something, they really commit to it. Sometimes at the detriment of other things, to the detriment of other things.
Yeah.
And it's a complicated thing to balance, but I really like the way that the team kind of wants to push these things. So yeah, that's why the more I hear, for instance, Pedro talk about it, it makes a lot of sense to me, because I thought when I was playing the game, like, oh, this is the online now. This is the way the online works now. But it made so much sense when they like introduced the first title update and the Sakura stuff and whatever. I was like, oh, okay. So like this is the section of the game where like people are gonna come back to log in back into and stuff and go back into.
Yeah. Well, I specifically with the hub, I tend to agree with the people that's maybe felt a little bit weird about the hub not being there. What Pedro said, however, is a very good point. Functionally, the hub is not really covering any specific need of the game that was, well, it's not like the hub was adding something that was already in the game, or maybe I mean that was missing in the game. I do think that, well, at some point I also thought that the experience was going to be more based on this idea that it was an open world and you can like meet hunters in the open and whatnot. There has been talk of the idea that maybe they got scared because, well, it could be a lot of reasons. I also think that it's probably not very easy to, create a game that has that feature to just have like a space. You join a lobby and you see people like in the open. Like to have that and to put it on top of everything else that's working on the background, that's crazy. Like I don't think we have the technology to have that.
Yeah, I think that was the intention, but to actually execute on that, it's hard, especially because we all know that connection-wise, not even just Wilds, Monster Hunter, since it became an online thing, have been having issues.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think specifically with the hub, the problem, or like maybe the main complaint that people have is the idea that the hub is in a way the symbol of the multiplayer element of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this.
That's a fair perspective to have, especially if you're like a veteran of the series.
Yeah.
Like I completely understand that. I want to also specify that like just because we say our thoughts doesn't mean we don't want to devalue what other people think.
No,
either,
for sure. Just saying, like, this is like, because you can see how people are repeating the same points, like, oh, like the game, especially when we talk about the possibility of the game being unfinished, it's like, oh no, like we couldn't refight Soshia on high rank, you didn't have the hub, we have seen that Lagiacrus and Seregios were intended to be in the game from the get-go, they were not there. There are things going around. In that note, by the way, I do want to clarify something, which is maybe it's interesting for you guys. You know how people say that Soshia was supposed to be in the game from the start?
Yeah.
And like that's one of the biggest points of maybe criticism when it comes to this conversation.
When you say from the start, you mean like grindable, I guess, like from
basically,
the start.
you it was replayable, and you had gear with it and stuff like that. So surprisingly, and obviously we have to take this with a grain of salt, because this is from this is a YouTube comment from one of my videos, specifically the one about the fiscal year of Capcom, and somebody in that video I comment, at some point that it's kind of like very possible that the game wasn't finished because of the missing Soshia fight in high rank and the missing hub and whatnot. And somebody, apparently that is a member of the leaks or the data mining community. Obviously, this is all with a grain of salt. This is what they are saying. We cannot really confirm this in any way. They said that they had contacts with somebody from the Monster Hunter dev team. So, like, quote-unquote inside information in this topic. And Soshia was actually not intended to be in the base game as a replayable fight. Like, it was never intended to be like that. However, Lagiacrus and Seregios were planned to be from the start. And you can see that because the armor files were in the game. You could have the armor from those monsters. I guess this is something that we will cover also in the next question anyway. But the thing is, those fights, they were planned to be there from the beginning, but it kind of beats the myth that, because the final boss of the game was not replayable, that the game feels rushed, it feels unfinished. We can see something that you have already mentioned many times in this episode, which is the way that things can change from one moment to another in development is just completely, like, it can take a whole team by surprise constantly. Priorities change. You have
not only that, but like, and sorry to interrupt. Like, not only that, but like, it's very common for teams that will release a game and have continuous updates to be like almost an update ahead, or even 2 updates ahead. Like in terms of like development, I know that like from my experience at least, like in the game that in Idle Showdown specifically, when we would announce a new character that was coming to the game, we were already like finishing the one that was coming up, because there's like a huge process like dedicated to QAing and playtesting and like making sure that these things are working properly, etc.
Yeah.
And I'm not, again, just to remind people, it's like, obviously I don't work there, but monsters can be done. They can be finished on a technical level. But there's a lot of like tiny details that they need to get done, I guess, and different priorities depending on what they need in different moments, right? Can shift it, like, hold up with this monster for now, and we can work on this one for whatever reason. Like, I can't obviously tell you. I don't understand.
No,
but-
yeah, we understand. So I just wanted to bring this up because this is another one of those points that is repeated constantly whenever we have a discussion like this. And I think this is something that I've talked with Pedro in the past. Maybe that you guys can help clarify a bit more, which is the idea that a game file or an asset being in the code or in the files doesn't necessarily mean that this was something, that was 100% intended to be in the game from the start, or that it is going to be even released. And we know this because Alatrian was supposed to be in Base World. Base World, like, come on. Like, that's a whole expansion before it was actually released. But can you maybe give a little bit more of, can you make some comments about how that process happens and, how things change, how sometimes you make a whole asset or a 3D model and then it's not used? Maybe bring a little bit of light on that specific aspect of development.
I'll go even deeper on that, because sometimes not even just one asset, sometimes entire areas remain on the code but are scrapped. They don't go to the end game, to the finished product. There's a modder and content creator that I follow, and I really like his stuff. He deals a lot with things related to From Software games. It's Lance McDonald. He is the creator of the 60 FPS mod for Bloodborne on PS4.
Wow.
He
Amazing.
just like puts a lot of videos about cut content from Bloodborne. So you have bosses, you have enemies, you have equipment, you have whole areas, like some areas that in the final game are like 2 rooms were initially planned to be like a whole dungeon, So it's extremely normal for any game that you can imagine to have a lot of files in the game code that either are not ready because they are still working on it to release on an expansion or maybe a title update or something, or just scrapped sometimes to even be used on a sequel. Like an example, Laggy, he was supposed to be in World, but it was scrapped, right? And now we have him. But what? So World was an incomplete and finished game as well because Laggy...
Yeah.
And even was shown in videos like from the developers, Laggy working, like fighting an Engineer, the wall. And it didn't make the game. So what? Is that unfinished now? So
Of course not.
I think like at the end it boils down to like a lack of communication and a lot of ignorance around game design and game development and how things work, right? So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I do think that this is not obviously that simple. From the developer's perspective, you can easily say this because you know how this works, right? Because the player does not get to see any part of this process, it is very difficult to then give companies, especially with how, well, damaged, let's say, is the trust from consumers towards video game companies. It is very difficult for the player to give the benefit of the doubt to developers or to different companies or publishers when it comes to these types of things, because the game was rather expensive. If we are if we are to be fair on this, and feeling that you're paying so much money for something that had their expectations and was promising so much for you as a fan of the series, I think your emotions will obviously get in the way. So now how do we amend this? How do we get the player to have a more reasonable stand or perspective with this situation? How can we go back to trying at least to give the benefit of the doubt to developers? How can we clear some of those doubts, clear some of that distrust that people can have when these type of things happen?
I need a moment.
That
for
is
this.
hard, dude. That's almost unrealistic,
Yeah.
Because
Damn. Okay.
yeah. No, because like honestly, even if let's talk Capcom, for instance, people are cheating on Wilds, sure. They have a lot of problems with the game, sure. But look at Capcom in the past like 5 years, releasing great games, listening to the community in general, hiring a lot, giving raises to their developers, like overall being a great company. Like at some point, I think I saw like last year a lot of people saying that it looks like we are in the 90s again because Capcom is the best publisher out there. But yet, when one thing happens that affects a lot of people, granted, which is the performance issues, people go crazy, go nuts. Like there's a lot of narratives that are created around it. There's a lot of issues that show up, like the whole debacle with the Japanese community and Capcom having to release that statement about the harassment to the devs there. I know it may not even necessarily be related to Monster Hunter specifically, but it's something related to the Japanese community against Capcom, right? Bro, no matter what, people are going to hop on that hate train because it also is something that sells, right? Like if you look on YouTube and a lot of people that doesn't even play Monster Hunter talking about wilds and
Oh, for sure.
hopping on
Yeah.
that hate trend. Like
Yeah.
it's unrealistic to believe there is a way to mitigate that when a problem happens. When the game releases with performance issues, there is going to be fire, there is going to be backlash, there is going to be a lot of those things.
Yeah. I mean, it
I
goes.
guess
Sorry, go ahead.
the one thing that we can try and do as developers, in part, is what we are doing right now, right? Talking about it, like bringing a little more context to the conversation from the perspective of people that worked on games. Even if we don't necessarily work at Capcom and Monster Hunter, we can talk about how things work and hope that people listen. But even that, even if it like in the future we have people that are much more informed on how these things work, the hate and the backlash and all that will still be happening because there are people that gain a lot with that, so
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Like, there's definitely a platform today or an environment where you can actually monetize dogpiling on things, on anything. Like, I mean, it's kind of ironic that I'm going to do this, but just look at how pirate software is being destroyed on social media. And from people that would never talk about him for whatever reason. And yet you keep seeing new videos from new content creators talking about him. And it's, it's that incentive. It could be even like, not even like a monetary incentive, because I don't even know how many of those channels are actually on that. But it can even be just basic clout sometimes, So obviously, yeah, it's very, very difficult. Kevin, you wanted to say something, I think.
No, actually, like I think Pedro encapsulated everything perfectly, and I'm just gonna say that I'm just gonna say that if there's like the best answer to your question, they gave it to you, which is like, yeah, it's doing what we're doing right now, which is as developers trying to be like as transparent and like kind of tell people about these things and like create a more dynamic discussion rather than just like blindly hate something that
Perfect.
is having issues.
Awesome. Okay. Now I think another aspect of why is it so difficult to give specifically Capcom the benefit of the doubt with Wilds is the whole situation with the financial year and how Capcom had a bit of an agenda when releasing the game early this year in order to meet their financial goals. Are you aware of this situation?
yes.
Okay. You, Kev?
Yeah, I
Okay.
am.
So what's your opinion on that?
Go Pedro.
Go ahead, Kev.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go. You started talking.
Okay.
Always having such respectful guests here. I love to see it. Anyway, go ahead, Pedro.
Yeah, it's complicated because to a degree, I think that it could have had a big impact on the development, of course. I think people run with the narrative of fiscal year like too much. It's way more nuanced than that, right? But to put it simply, I guess it had an impact because companies are moved by money. So, and not even necessarily in the greedy way. You can think like, for instance, you have a budget to make the game, and you give when you start making, you give like predictions, like estimates for when things will be done, when things will be released, right? So more likely than not, the Monster Hunter team gave some like estimates for when the game was going to be ready, and they allocated a certain budget to make the game. And when they get closer to that and see that they cannot finish by the time that they say they would at the beginning, what are we going to do now? We are going to ask for more time, but more time as well actually goes towards like more money, so more expenses. And while we're having more time and more expenses, we are not getting more money because we don't have a product to sell. And that goes into a whole like rabbit hole of, okay, there is of course the fiscal year ending and the results and all that those things, but without money the games won't be made, right? So I think there's a balance there, but I 100% I believe that the fiscal year ending and the targets that they set for that fiscal year had an impact on the development, but a lot of that is like normal. Like you need money, you need to make money to keep working
course.
on stuff, right?
Mhm.
So
It is still a company, still a business. You have to make ends meet. Obviously, this can be easily be hand waving as like, don't defend the multi-billion company. Is not necessarily about that this time around.
yeah.
Obviously, well, before I make my comment, I want to hear what Kev has to say.
Yeah, so I have like very again, Pedro's basically speaking for me. So, but like I have very similar views regarding that, right? But it's definitely that balance of like you get a certain amount of money from investors and you need to plan that schedule for the game. And it's like obviously as a developer, like of course I would have delayed the game. Of course, I would have wanted that. But I think Wilds was in development and people were, the well was running dry for quite a bit, let's just say. And eventually it just had to happen. It's like as much as I think I'm in a weird position because almost all games that I've worked on has been with zero budget. So no money.
Damn.
And like I've thankfully had really good producers that know how to manage and make a game with zero budget, and us making no money, like zero money. Which the game there obviously is different because we don't have investors. So I can't imagine the amount of pressure that these people are in, right? Technically, like, yes, I worked as a contractor in the game that I spoke of, like in Phantom Breaker. But most of my like developer career, I haven't been getting paid. Like it's just like so for me seeing these type of issues once money is like introduced, it makes sense, especially when you're like in a bigger company, and it's up to like the team to balance that budget that they have with the people that invested in them for them to make that product. It's like at the end of the day, like you just said, it's like Capcom's a company. It's like they gotta make the hard choices. Someone had to make the hard choice, And I assure you that if you, like I've said before, like if you ask any developer, would you like more time? They will say yes.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it is. We cannot say that it was confirmed, but there's enough, let's say, evidence that suggests that the Monster Hunter dev actually fought for more time to develop the game, because and in this particular aspect, or somebody might have to fact check this, but I'm pretty sure there's an interview circling around Twitter. It's a transcript of an interview between investors and Capcom. And investors were asking, why are you not going to release the game on December? Wouldn't it be better to release it then? Because you can kind of like make a sale with the festivities, namely Christmas, right? And the devs, or like Capcom or whatever, whoever was talking to them, says like, well, we do want to make sure that the game experience is as polished as we can get it to give players the experience that they want and that they can enjoy. And the same guy, that basically commented on my video saying that Soshia was not intended for the release of the game. This person actually points out that, it apparently was confirmed that the game was intended to be launched in December. And the devs were able to buy 2 more months of development, right? So they were obviously under the pressure that they had to finish this game to make the whole financial year target happen, right? But even under that pressure, they still try to buy as much time as possible to develop the game. So when you guys explain these things to me, I can see the parallels between like some of the pieces of information that the community has also managed to gather here and there. And it becomes obviously a much more complex and also interesting conversation to have when it comes to these processes, right? Not everything is as clear cut. When we talk about what happens between the expectations, from the investors, from the company, from the developers, I get the feeling, as somebody who is completely outside of that industry, I get the feeling that there's a lot of different aspirations and, in many cases, conflicts of interests. Can we separate the developer team of a game from their company? And in the same line, can we separate the company from the interests of the investors?
I'd say yes and yes, but it's more complicated than that, right?
It's like this question is like basically to an individual level almost.
Yeah.
Because some people might have more closer ties to certain things, while others don't. And
well, I think it's important to be able to visualize that scale, because there's a bit of a complicated situation with the developer team of Monster Hunter right now, especially in Japan. There's some things that are going on social media right now about a specific statement that was trying to prevent harassment. And I feel like the anger that some people have towards Capcom is unfiltered and doesn't really make the difference between one entity of the company and another. And I would think that it's important to make the difference, because sometimes you think that the whole company doesn't really have your best interest in mind, and maybe there are people in the company that do. And I don't think it's not fair to lose sight of that simply because of a very emotional reaction from how the experience around, for example, Wilds has turned out. So this is why I'm bringing up the question.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that kind of goes to what you're saying as well. But one thing that I would say is like the developers of the game, in almost every case, they love the game they are working on, right? They want to make something that is good. Of course, some of the developers in the team, actually almost every developer in the team, want the games to sell, right? Want the game to do good because it's their livelihood at the end of the day. But I think it's fair to say that the developers that work on the game want to bring that experience to other people to enjoy. There's not, I don't think there's even one developer that works on a game and thinks like, I want the public to suffer or to dislike my game.
I mean, Pedro, I'm sorry, but with the existence of NFT games, that is kind of becoming a reality.
That is different because NFT games, in my view, are not games.
Okay, no, that's
Those are
fair.
like
But
a
we cannot.
complete different shit.
No, of
Yeah.
course, we cannot rule out, however, that some people make quote unquote games that end up on Steam for not the best reasons, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, no, you got a point. I mean, I would say that
I'm
more
thinking,
traditional developers are on that
yeah,
line.
yeah. I'm touching more on this kind of developer because I'm one of those, right? I don't think like for Monster Hunter, I don't think the developers don't want the game to do good, and I don't think the developers don't love the game. They love the game they're working on. They want everybody to have a good experience. Like it's unthinkable to disagree with that, in my opinion. You know, like you have to understand, especially for games like that size of game, they are pouring their lives into that game, into that project. It's not like a month that you just do a contract work for it. Some people might be that, but most of the developers that get the hate are the ones that are working for the company, like working at in that project for like 7 years, putting everything they have, sometimes doing a lot of crunch to make sure that something gets done, right? Like managing a lot of stuff that happens during development because dude, development, like any other job, a lot of things happen. A lot of things happen. Like maybe someone gets sick, maybe someone dies, maybe someone leaves the company and you have to replace him and do stuff and find someone that is capable of doing that work. Like there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of love put into it. And when you look at the company and the developer, it's like the company gives the money, the developer gives their life for the game, you know? So
Damn,
we have to separate that.
that
We
was some
have to.
bars.
Yeah, dude, but because that's it. Like, especially in Japan, like work for a lot of people is life, right? Like
Yeah, their work culture is very
it's
different in that sense.
it's everything for them. It's everything they do. So I can understand people disagreeing with design decisions, disliking uh, the game itself, like getting pissed about the release state of the game when it doesn't work for them. I can understand all that, but you have to understand that it's a lot of time from a lot of people, a lot of blood, a lot of love put into it, and you cannot treat those people as like an entity that doesn't give a fuck, doesn't care about you, doesn't care about the game, doesn't care about anything other than money. You can even do that for Capcom, the company itself, sure. But even that, I don't agree because Capcom is also made of people. Like they also have a lot of people that care, a lot of people that want things to work.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
So you're gonna tell me? So you're gonna tell me that you've seen like Ryozo for like almost 2 entire decades, and you're gonna think that they don't care about the game?
yeah,
Dude's been
yeah.
in dude's been in that company for like almost 20 years. Like, like okay, yeah, I've hated my job for 20 years.
But this
Dude,
is why I ask this, however, like, because you say Ryozo, and I know who the guy is, but I don't know who the CEO of Capcom is, and I don't know like how many layers in the hierarchy, the structural hierarchy in the company there are. So, for example, whoever is making like the main difficult decisions, and whoever is like, guiding the direction of the company, I think they have a very different view from what somebody like Ryoso has. That is my perspective from the outside. So sometimes I would like to be able to visualize better how these things work in the industry in general, to see where does the where do the limitations start for the developer and where do they end, so that I can then make the difference between, okay, was this particular design decision an actual game developer design choice, or was this some kind of limitation or time constraint, or insert whatever inconvenience you can think of.
that's also very nuanced because it's a balance, right? Uh, you have the people that will give you the money and time to do stuff, but they are not like saying, "Oh, you have X amount of time to do this, and this is your budget." It's more of the producer goes to the company and say, "Oh, we want to make this game. We think we are going to need this amount of time and this amount of money to make it," and then the negotiation starts, right? Uh, some decisions might be due to like, okay, we need to make some more returns. So what can we do to guarantee that we are going to have more returns? That's when we see things like the cosmetic stuff being sold for wilds, right? But I would say that those things don't really affect gameplay in any way. So I think it's a balance. For some teams, for some studios, there will be a lot that goes into it that limits or influences game design towards making more money, for sure. It's not that it's not that difficult to see when you have things like loot boxes and battle passes and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But at the same time, it's as I said, it's a negotiation. Like the people that are making the game, that are working on the game, will negotiate with the company. The company will negotiate with the investors, and that's how the game is going to be made. There has
Exactly.
to be some compromise, right? Because at the
There
end of the
has to
day,
be, yeah, like Pedro says, there
yeah,
has to be someone that is the bridge
yeah,
between these different entities so that the game can exist.
yeah. But I would say, like, game design wise, the developers are only limited to like time, budget, and technology, right? And a lot of times, depending on the size of the game, all those things are, you kind of have an advantage, right? You have a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of tech. So it depends. It really do. But one thing I'll add is that sometimes the limitation or the influence is not even from the company or the investors themselves. It's from the history of the franchise and the players and stuff like that. Because when you're doing a sequel, you kind of have a lot of crunches, right? You can move too far away without pissing people off. You can't keep things too samey because it will also piss people off. And you can take too many risks because you have to have a return on the money, right?
Yeah.
So if your risk is too high, we get something like Concord, for instance, that
Oh no.
cost like what 300 million to less than a month,
Hmm.
and that is a thing that is a big limitation for game development when you go to those higher levels, so there's a lot.
Yeah,
There's
I
a
think
lot.
an example of this is what happened with Path of Exile 2. Even though the changes that they made to that game did it did piss people off, they
Yeah,
did the changes like knowingly, and they knew they had to do them in order to refresh the formula.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
and so they were like, "Yeah, we know that some people are gonna get mad, but we have to take this risk. Otherwise, like, what's the point of making Path of Exile 2?" Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
All right.
for
So
sure.
I wanted to really discuss this mainly because, specifically in the case of Monster Hunter Wilds, I do believe that the devs deserve some level of grace. Say whatever you want to Capcom as a company, because, we don't really know what's the different experience and story that each person that has bought their products has with them. Even then, it's always important to remember that even in a company, in a multi-billion-dollar company, a company is still people, as you said. I really like that part, that segment that you mentioned. Uh, Looking at things as entities, it is a lot easier to demonize them and to, you know, uh, completely lose the plot on remembering that behind all of this, there's also people. I just think that there's this maybe, especially from the consumer perspective, we see ourselves as this gaming community, and sometimes we see investors or companies or like CEOs and executives that are basically swimming in money as the quote unquote enemy sometimes. It is very easy to fall on that dynamic. And I don't think that this is something that we should do with the Monster Hunter devs, mostly because, as you have also mentioned, they are basically like breaking their backs to make this game happen. They're giving their life for the game.
Yeah. You need to remember that like games are being made under the rules of the game, you know? Like these are the rules of the game. You need money. You need people to allocate the money. You need people to invest in your company so that you can make these artistic art. These are the rules of the game. Like it's just that's how it is. And people won't be like gonna like pleased ever, in my opinion. It's just like that's why I admire a lot like the Monster Hunter team in particular, because when they have like a vision for like the next sequel or like their next game and they have like ideas, they really commit to them. And I think that's really like admirable, and the way that they do it is really well done, and like they strike a really good balance when it comes to their core mechanics and expanding upon them, even retracting on like later games on like different things. And I think they really do a good job. I think a lot as well on games like Street Fighter. Like developing Street Fighter is a nightmare. We're talking like 2 decades of legacy mechanics that you carry on your back every single game you make. And that can make or break the game entirely. And Monster Hunter is a very complex game as well. And I think that the way that they still find so many different creative ways to innovate on the formula is really commendable, honestly. With a franchise with so many years. Just kind of wanted to like mention that.
Yeah, and I will add to that because we really have to give props to the Monster Hunter team, because in AAA it's really rare to see a studio try to innovate with a sequel from a franchise that is as big as Monster Hunter is now, right? And not only that, also show that they listen to feedback and implement on feedback quite fast, actually, right? So
that's something we don't talk about a lot, actually.
You rarely see that.
The rate of the implementation of their feedback is actually very fast. It's actually really fast.
Okay, this is interesting because, from a more of an outsider perspective, I think a lot of people like to do the comparison between AAA companies or AAA companies, and smaller studios or indie game studios that were able to create a product that was like amazing, a very good experience. It was very well fleshed out, and all of this, like, people bring examples like Expedition 33 is one of them, maybe. You have Balatro as another example of like something that was kind of like a wonderful, maybe accident, we can call it, maybe. And so players say like, oh, there's these smaller companies, smaller developer teams that are able to not only bring me a very well fleshed out experience, but they also respond to feedback quite quickly. Why is it that AAA companies cannot keep up with that? They make this comparison between those things. What is it that we as players are not, maybe as gamers, consumers, whatever you want to call it, what is it that we're not seeing in the differences between a big company and smaller studios?
Okay. I want to give a perspective from the designer's perspective. Like, I have actually sat down both in Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Wilds to distract myself doing documents and like seeing how things work in the game, the different systems that they have going on. And it honestly, like, the way that systems, especially in Monster Hunter, which is a massive game that has multiple, and I mean multiple systems that intertwine with each other constantly, a change somewhere has ripples. It has ripples everywhere. And it's something that is very important. For instance, the feedback on the weapons. Some people were dissatisfied with a couple weapons, and even myself actually had like some like critiques when it came to the charge play specifically and the way that it played. And in this latest update, they addressed a lot of the things from it. But I have to emphasize how actually fast that is, because even if the game is a PvE game, I guess, yeah, exactly, you need to, every change that you make to anything, you have to see how it kind of ripples across the rest of everything. And a lot of people think that balance is a spreadsheet, and balance is like inherently emotional. Everything about balance is like emotional. When people feel that something is weak, they didn't data mine it and like check the emotion value of the move, and they were like, you see, this is why it's weak. And it's like, yes, some people do that in the community, but more often than not, it's more of a feel and emotional thing. And that's why inherently creating, this is kind of a bit off topic, but creating imbalance in game is important to give character to things, like in Monster Hunter's case, weapons. Creating imbalance in the weapons is really important to like give them a strong identity. And of course, there needs to be a careful balance within the imbalance, which is ironic. But making that work gives these weapons their strengths and their identity and things like that. I'm focusing mostly on the weapon balance stuff, because I really think that that with the humongous amount of like weapons and moves and the way they interact with different monster parts, elemental, raw, and like all these different mechanics, crit, attack, and set damage values, abilities, skills, I guess they're called in Monster Hunter. All these things need to be kind of taken into account when you like make these decisions in accordance with the way that your players feel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was about to say that, you know, my previous guests from the last episode would disagree with the whole idea that it's only feelings, because goddamn, they get into the data of the game to an unhealthy degree. But I understand what you're saying when it comes to the identity of weapons. You have to give players some feel of, I guess it's easier to perceive where the strength and the weaknesses lie in the weaknesses. It's more noticeable in the defects.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't want to also say that, like, obviously the spreadsheets are important when you're going into the nitty gritty and stuff, right? But what is the intent? Like, what's important is that this is at the service of the intent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How do you want this weapon to feel? And yeah, that's kind of more of what I mean. It's inherently emotional because when you pick up a greatsword, you expect it to hit hard, have a lot of hit stop, and, you know, big number, big stun. And when you pick up other weapons, you expect different behaviors, right? Different feelings of things. So yeah, I wish I could delve more into it, but I want to give Pedro a break to talk.
No, but I definitely agree a lot with what you're saying, and I'll add that the numbers and the spreadsheet. It's not that it doesn't matter; it does. It's part of the equation, right?
Exactly.
But looking at the numbers and just at the numbers and like reaching conclusions based only on that is a reductive way of looking at things and looking at games in general, because games are much more than that. I know that for some people it at the end boils down to it, but it's much more than that. And just to touch on the question itself about like why big games and small games have that difference of the timing to apply feedback and the quality of stuff and all that, I would say that the question itself already kind of has the answer, which is size, right? Like, as much as people like to say that X indie game is better because it's showing the industry how it's done and this and that, when you look at the game and you look at what they are comparing to, the amount of stuff that is on a smaller indie game quality is smaller in the game. And the amount of stuff there is in a game like Monster Hunter Wilds, for instance, is jarring. Like, there is so much that goes into Wilds and other AAA games that release these days. Even games that fail and that you can say that are objectively bad AAA games, you look at them deeply, you see that there's a lot that goes into making those games. There's a lot of that goes into making the game design, the programming, the technical art, the 3D, the animation, everything. So at the end, it boils down to that size, the amount of stuff. So I love Expedition 33. It's one of my favorite games this year. Easily a contender for Game of the Year. Easily one of my favorite RPGs of all time. But if you compare it to Wilds in terms of the stuff that is in the game, of course you can say that Expedition 33 have more quality in a lot of stuff, but complexity, amount of stuff, it's like impossible to compare those two, right? So that is one of the main reasons: size, amount of stuff. How much do you have to consider before you do anything in a AAA game when you compare to a AA game like Expedition 33 or even a smaller indie game, you know? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to add on to that. That's why a lot of indie games are really focused. Like
Yeah.
really focused on one or a couple of like very refined like mechanics. Like if you think about a game like Balatro, it's very focused, like laser focused on the type of experience that they want you to have, right? But Monster Hunter, like Monster Hunter Wilds, there's a ton of different things you can interact with in that game, or like not interact with, but like necessarily like different aspects of the game that you can partake in that are different. That could be entire games on their own, basically.
Yeah, sometimes a simple system in a game like Wilds has more work into it than an entire indie game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, I happen to have some friends that are developers, and they have explained this a little bit to me, saying that because you have smaller teams, the chain of, well, mainly the agility behind the chain of decisions that can be taken by smaller studios tends to be faster when it comes to answering to different problems. Because it's like there's less people, they tend to be a lot closer to one another, and thus they address things a lot easier with a lot less bureaucracy. So it's one of those things that I haven't really thought of before until I had this conversation with them. Because I think it tends to be a little bit glossed over sometimes by people. Like, oh, they have so many people in their company. Why can't they make changes or fix things quickly or this or that? And it's, as you're saying, the size of things makes it complicated. The hierarchy of command makes it complicated. The bureaucracy makes it complicated. There's a lot of other aspects, obviously.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I wasn't even touching necessarily on the chain of decisions, but that is also another aspect.
Okay.
Yeah, that is another aspect, which is honestly like, again, like we've said, like with the rate of response to feedback is pretty fast. It actually travels through, let's call it the chain of command really fast.
Yeah, okay.
For a studio so big.
Okay. Well, going back to more like game developer related like things or experiences, is there something about the industry that usually frustrates you as a developer when it comes to the gaming industry?
Yeah. A lot. Like the games industry right now is in a bad position, right? Due to the
You mean as a whole?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because COVID led to a bubble being created, and that bubble did not burst necessarily, but it's leaking, let's say. A lot of issues. related to money, of course. Like you see the layoffs happening every day, and that is fucking frustrating because sometimes you were hired to do something really good and people decided that okay, let's hire a lot more people and invest on this, and they don't like look really deeply to the future, and out of a sudden, oh okay, we don't want this anymore, let's cut the funding and fire everyone, you know. That is extremely frustrating, especially when you're dealing with creative stuff, which games are creative.
Yeah, no, and it's happening often too. It's a
Yeah.
story that's like a group, like a team of developers finish a game, and then the company's like, okay, thank you, bye bye. Or not
Oh
even
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Sometimes it's before even they get to finish it. It's like, okay, I don't really want to keep funding this, so bye bye.
Exactly, exactly. That happens a lot, and that is, I'd say, that is my major frustration and my major problem with the games industry right now. But a secondary one, which I think it's really important and annoys me so much, and I think it's like the source of a lot of the conversation that we have around Wilds itself, is communication. Communication in the games industry with the customers is pretty bad.
When you mean communication, do you mean to say that it's the channels that are not working well, like the means to communicate between player and developer, or is it the way that communication is done?
The way they communicate and what they say. Like,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, like you have opportunities to say a lot of good things, that a lot of informative things. You have the opportunity of like talking with the players before a game releases to show stuff, because there's a lot of secrecy that comes around in game development, because it makes sense, there's a lot of competition out there. But at the same time, let's say for a game big as Monster Hunter, that already have like some things that people expect about the game, let's talk about it before the game releases. Like after we announce a game, let's talk about it. Let's open some channels. Let's talk a little bit about development, what goes into making a monster. Let's make like a series of videos showcasing development for the game. Like there are some studios that do that, but they are few and far between each other. So let's have more of that. Let's make people more informed, because that's good, because it would lessen some of the narratives that are created around games, and would be helpful to encourage more people to try and go work with games, even if they are making their own, you know.
Interesting. No, yeah, for sure. I do think that it would be something very positive to mostly to bring developers and players closer to each other, so that like we can actually have an idea of what to expect, instead of thinking that everything goes into a black box and then poop, you have a game, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And to a degree, there's also a little bit of me that understands why some of those things happen, because that's one frustration I have with the public, is the how easy it is for them to turn to hate and harassment and all those things that we know happen a lot. So
No, for sure. Hmm. And you, Kev, what is something that frustrates you, or what are some things that frustrate you a lot from the industry?
Oh dear. I had to. So Pedro said basically a lot of the stuff as well, but I I think the industry sometimes can feel like a exclusive club. Um, and if you don't have contacts, if you don't know the right people, it's very hard for you to get in. Like, and sometimes it's like a bit frustrating because of that. Um, I have experience like in the industry, obviously not even close to something like Pedro, but when I want to, like, let's say, keep especially now because of the problems that Pedro just talked about, it's even harder. People are like, they have their close close groups, and they jump from company to company when something happens and things like that. And it just kind of feels like, you know, there's really good people that deserve those jobs. I'm not just talking about myself, I'm talking about like everyone basically. And it just sometimes feels like that's kind of part of the industry. It feels like a club. Like if you're not part of the club, you don't know the right people, you don't get to get in, you know? Also, I don't like how the industry is also kind of shaping into like a very fast paced, in the sense that like they care less about nurturing their developers and like kind of helping them grow in order to strengthen the things that the company wants and whatever like company and game developers want to create. And instead they rely on the whole contract aspect of it, and like getting people in, getting people out, and whatever. And I think that there should be like a bigger emphasis on game studios feeling like game studios again, where there's like a group of like professionals that want to like develop their skill sets and things like that, knowing that like they're not gonna get like fired in like 2 months or something, because the company is like investing in them so that they develop themselves professionally more and things like that. I just feel like lately it just feels like, oh, we need this thing, let's get this random person to do it, and like let's get this other random person to do it. I feel like if you want to build like a really strong, reliable team, I think that it's great to have a consistent group of people, you know?
For sure. And I kind of, well, this is not something that my viewers know maybe, but I can relate a lot to the idea that this is like a very private, exclusive club. Because at least in my part of the world, I've been trying to get into voice acting, dubbing, and voiceovers for publicity. And it's especially the industry here in my country is exactly like that. If they don't know you by name, and if you don't have like a record of things to show for it, you're not getting into it, right? And so it makes this environment be very, very competitive. It makes things also feel a bit unfair, even though all you want to do is like bring something of value to the market, to the to the industry in general.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I want to add, by the way, Pedro said something earlier, like being more open with the development process. What I would give for the Monster Hunter team to give a presentation on the technical aspects of like how a monster gets created, I would give anything for that.
Yeah, I don't really know how much of that sometimes can be kind of like hidden from the public as like, you know, like Mr. Krabs hiding the Krusty Burger formula kind of thing. I don't know how much of that could be true in that sense. I think in a world where you can kind of trust that nobody's going to plagiarize you today, even more than ever, where you have artificial intelligence that is actively doing that. But anyway, the thing is, obviously that would be extremely interesting and intriguing for a lot of people. There are some snippets and interviews with the developers as to the way that they were making the decisions, but not really. I don't think there's any. We don't have anything showing like how they actually developed this, or how they rendered the monsters or anything.
Yeah, when they were talking about the integration of like Icarus and the
or like the way that they designed
were,
Fatalis too, for example.
Yeah, like they talked a little bit about how like these are the crumbs. These are the crumbs that we
yeah, okay. Yeah, it would be very cool to have an industry that could be more open like that, but I do think that a lot of it's hiding behind the fear of getting like somebody to copy your idea and then do it better or something. I don't even know.
I'll add just another thing on the whole things that you guys spoke about, being a closed club and all that. That is true in many levels as well, because one of the other issues I have with the industry is how they treat contract work and outsourcing work.
Yes.
Brother, if I could speak about the amount of games that I've worked on that I won't be able to say that I worked on, it's not even like oh, wait for the game to be released. No, I won't be able to say I worked on the game is nuts. Like sometimes they don't say your studio worked on it. Sometimes they don't say that you worked on it. Sometimes you only can say that you worked on said game after 10 years. So
Wait, so it's basically
that is
companies getting
frustrating.
yeah, it was like basically companies getting the credit for your work and not
Yeah,
giving any of it to you.
they can't say that, okay, let's say I did the main character for a game. They cannot say that another person did the character, but they can decide to not say that I did that
Okay.
and not put me on the
No, no,
credits.
no.
You know?
Come on.
So yeah,
All
that is
right.
something that frustrates me a fucking lot. It's very common. Very, very common.
Yeah,
Surprisingly, just to add a bit to that, a company that is very nice about it is Blizzard.
What?
Yeah. I mean, my name is in Diablo, dude. Like,
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know, man. I cannot give like a crumb of like benefit of the doubt to
what a
Blizzard.
twist.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, so there's another thing that I'm kind of wondering about your experience, and that would be, I feel like sometimes you guys work on these projects and on these games, and then you deliver them to the public, and the players will oftentimes gloss over a lot of the parts and processes that go behind the development of a game. So like, what is something that about game development that tends to be glossed over and sometimes even disregarded by the consumers of this hobby that you think should be understood better?
ooh, the amount of work, basically. Uh,
Or like how
to
much time it
put
takes to do these things?
not just how much time it takes, but let's use Monster Hunter as an example. Something that I see people say a lot is, oh, if you already have a monster in an older game, why don't you just put it on the new game with better visuals? Because it's not that simple. You have to do a lot of work. Even if you have like the 3D model, the rig, the all the animations, even if you have some of the code for the AI of the monster, integrating all that to a new game would make you have to most likely remake the whole 3D model because it's likely way lower than the rest, and if it's a little bit off, it will be like very perceptible when you compare to other monsters in the game. If you redo the model, you probably will have to redo the rig. Rig is like this skeleton of the monster where you animate. You use the rig to animate the monster. So you have to redo that. You will have to most likely revamp the AI, and when you bring it to the game, you have to make sure that it works well with the shaders, with the lightning, with the effects. You have to make sure that he can move in the environment. You have to make sure that he can work with the other monsters. So you have to make sure that he work with the player and the new mechanics the player have. So that is the main thing. Is I'd say, like, the amount of work for every small thing, especially on a AAA game, is what I think people need to understand. Even if I just add like a endemic life to the game, it's going to be a lot of work to make it.
Yeah, okay. So it is just very meticulous work. There's no shortcuts usually for this.
Yeah.
I want to highlight because I think the lame, or like not lame, but like it is true that like yeah, basically everything. But if I had to, like, I guess highlight things that I think people should appreciate more, two things. UI. My god, UI is really hard. Like, it's very complicated and really At least for me, it's like it's very complicated and a lot of work goes into it. And designing a proper UI is extremely
Brother.
difficult.
It's so
Yeah, no.
complicated that I know a lot of people that are focused on UI.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for
And
UI
I've
to
seen
work. Yeah, go
I've
ahead.
seen job listings for UI. So many
Yeah,
like UI. It's
yeah.
like people don't want to
Yeah.
do that. It's really hard,
Bro.
Uh,
That in the fact that UI most of the times have to work alongside UX. So UI UX is something that really is like
Yeah.
attached together. So,
You know what's kind of funny, and this has nothing to do with the conference that Capcom was going to do that was cancelled. You know, the details of why it was cancelled are unfortunate, but
yeah.
a few months ago, I sometimes I browse on Reddit, and somebody told me, on some of the comments that I made there, that the Monster Hunter UI, as terrible as many people think it is, apparently the people who made that UI wanted to give a conference in Japan, or actually gave a conference in Japan about how to make good UIs. And even in Japan, this thing was being criticized, and it was kind of ironic to see that people that didn't give maybe the best experience for that specifically were making a conference about it. But maybe this goes to show that even when you as a as a player look at this thing and you can see how unintuitive it is, or maybe how clunky it is, maybe even the clunkiest UIs were like a work of genius by the average UI developer, which would make a lot
to
of
be
sense.
fair,
even
For me.
Even Capcom struggles with it.
Yeah.
Even Capcom
Yeah.
struggles with it.
No, they.
But I mean,
I
to
would say
be
they have a lot
fair-
of problems with UI in general. Mm.
They do. But to be fair, translating UI from
Oh my god,
Japanese
that's another
games
layer.
to
That's another
Western games it's kind of a
Yikes.
crazy work.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like sometimes the
actually-
UI for a net Japanese game looks terrible when we use it, but for them it's going to work very well. So yeah.
I
There's
actually
that.
have experience in this because Idol Showdown, it was a game that was made with English and Japanese support, and oh my god, it was something to behold. When I saw the spreadsheet that we had, because we use like Excel to like put the translation and everything. Wow, it's just we thank God that we had a really good like UI designer that kind of took it into account from the beginning. But that can cost you to remake an entire UI. That can
Yeah,
cost you
for sure.
deeply. So that's like really, yeah. That's one thing I wanted to highlight. And the second thing, the art of hitbox placement. The art of hitbox placement.
That
People-
one I think is like, that's rocket science. That's just, I don't know, like that's antimatter studies there, because especially when you look at games that have really good hitboxes, like what we started seeing, for example, people complain a lot
Yeah, like
about.
Glacial.
Like Glacial has such good hitboxes, right? But yeah, so that's an example of how things can go very wrong and how much work you can put behind that type of thing.
I think hitbox placement is basically an art form. I
Absolutely.
love it.
I really like it from a fighting game perspective, which is why I tend to draw comparisons between Monster Hunter and fighting games. It's because the hitboxes and spacing and all of those things are sometimes just as important between those games.
I used to like sit down with like our combat designer. It's like they were like the lead that helped us like gameplay designers to help implement hitboxes in our game. And just sitting there and observing them like do their work and like explain the reasonings as to why it's so important to like shape hitboxes in a certain way, and like it's honestly like a beautiful art form, honestly.
For sure. So then there's another thing that I'm kind of wondering with this conversation, and it's, players are usually very good at finding a problem in a game, but as we have kind of talked about already, they are not always the best at communicating or suggesting good solutions. What has been your experience when it comes to collecting feedback from players when you're developing a game?
Oof, that is difficult. My experience in collecting feedback specifically were usually not with the final customer. We're not with the final player. Was usually with contract work for people that play testers. But even then, play testers sometimes are not that well versed in game development, and their feedback is also not as great.
Do you
Like, they
need?
can-
Sorry, question, Pedro. Do you need to be a game developer to make? I mean, to do game testing.
No,
Okay.
not always. Some studios hire people like that just signed up for that, but
Yeah.
there's also companies that do that kind of work, right? And then
I've
they,
even
they
seen-
hire people that have more experience and all that.
I've even seen some studios like bring the games to kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. They do.
interesting.
They do.
One thing that because at some point, I was interested on this whole game testing thing, and I saw a video from somebody that had worked in the industry. Cannot really say, or it's not even that I can say, is that the guy couldn't say it in the video, but he worked in game testing, and he said that usually the biggest problem that he finds is that sometimes it is not very important to be articulate or very exhaustive with the way that you describe the errors or the bugs that you find. Sometimes it's just about finding the bug and like pointing it out. And this created a dynamic, it's the typical kind of like unfortunate situation that you have with KPIs, where I'm only going to do work that is following these key performance indicators. I'm not going to try to do an exhaustive good job. I only want to reach these like targets that are required from me, because that's what's going to get me paid, basically. So
a lot of times that makes sense because, as I said, like, feedback from players usually is not as well articulated. So when you have them given too much stuff and too much like detail on what they think about that specific thing, it kind of sometimes it can hurt more. It makes it harder to understand and work on top of that specific feedback. Like, it's easier if you can see the screen the player is playing, like tape it, the whole thing. It's include by the way, a lot of testing is made like the screen is being taped, like recording the whole gameplay, but there's also a camera pointing towards the face of the person and the hands of the person, right? So the developer see the whole thing, not just what's happening on the screen, but also the reactions and how the player is dealing with the controls and all that those things, right? And that is more valuable in a lot of cases than what the person can tell you, because sometimes they give feedback that is not even necessarily what happened. So that's why sometimes it's really hard to take into account feedback from players. And that's why sometimes the feedback from players is not as reliable, because they may have found something, but they can't explain exactly what it was. And sometimes they explain it in a way that it might actually be something completely different. And when they give suggestions on how to improve, it's even harder, because in my experience, when even myself, I do that as well. When I give a suggestion about something on how to improve, a feedback in that sense, it's much more personal than I would like it to be as a developer. I will receive that, and I know it's going to be something that specific player wants, but maybe doesn't translate well for the whole player base.
Okay, it's very difficult to find a large-scale consistency across reviews and feedback.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Exactly.
I kind of had the idea that that's how you guys did it. Like you tried finding the multiple points of more or less like similarity between like what is the most common feedback that we're getting, and they would try to apply that. Now, Kev, before I move on with the next point, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I definitely agree with like everything that Pedro said. Something that's really important is that something that helps developers a lot, especially when you want to identify good feedback, is having like a strong vision of intent with the things that you're testing. So if something has a particular behavior you want it to have, and you want it to feel a certain way, like I like the camera example because if it's causing that sort of like emotion that you want from the player, etc., then those are good signs, right? And yeah, I remember saying like it is true, like players are very good at like having a negative feeling and kind of telling you the negative feeling. That doesn't necessarily mean that the feedback is like Pedro said, like necessarily accurate. That's why usually some of between the complexity of acquiring this feedback, some of the best suggestions that I've often had from players are presented in a way of feelings. So like, I'll give a random example. It's like using a fighting game. It's like I feel like my character can't get past these projectiles. Like my opponent is throwing that this character is like kind of throwing at me. When I jump, they catch me, and none of my moves like help me. My special moves help me like dodge the projectile.
I've noticed that. You can see it even in like places that are not necessarily about feedback for games. You see it on like in the way that people talk about the games, just in general. When people make reviews, they make comments, they make observations. Everything is like, I feel like this is not engaging. For example, that's a very classic type of sentence. And
yeah,
I know that it's like,
and those aren't like very helpful.
yeah, that's actually they. It's very easy to think that you're saying something there when you're not really, which is it's complicated.
But there are some like for instance, what I just said. It's like you're not necessarily telling me that this is you as a recipient, right? You're like telling me this is like kind of frustrating you in a way. And then I, as a designer, can look at the interaction and situation and go like, okay, we can take this from multiple angles. We can see the tools of the character being affected by the projectile. We can see the tools of the person sending the projectile. What if the problem is actually the projectile from the opponent? What if that's too strong? Well, we don't know, but at least I have an idea of the feeling, and I actually didn't intend for the player using this character to have this frustration. So how can we observe this in a holistic way that we can like kind of start tackling this so that the character fills its intended purpose of actually not having this frustration with this interaction that they're having in the game? Does that make any sense?
No, it does. For me, at least. I do hope for the viewers, it's the same. So in other words, because and I really appreciate your comments on this idea of the strong vision of intent. I think I play video games in two ways. Now that I've been doing this for so many years, because I think I grabbed like a Super Nintendo controller when I was like 5 or 4. So with age maybe, and with like time, I have the part of me that wants to just enjoy the game and be entertained. And then I have developed this kind of like exercise where I try to see that intent. It's like I play the game thinking of that intent from the developers. What are they trying to make me do? And this is partly because, I'm kind of a fan of psychology. I studied psychology for a year, actually, and then I moved on to another career. A lot of what you're trying to do with game development is dictating behavior, which is extremely difficult, and it's a whole science in and of itself, right? It's like
even that can be debated, because as a designer, it's like most of the time, I don't know if Pedro has had this experience. You probably have. It's like you design something with an intent, players aren't gonna do the intent.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
But even then, for example, there are things that you don't want to happen and things that you do want to happen in a game. So obviously, easy example in Monster Hunter, we don't want people cheating the time attack quests, which is why we banned them. You know, it's a bit of a meta example because that involves a different problem. Another thing can be, for example, you don't really want people to maybe feel that this game is unfair, so you give them a lot of healing items. You know, things like that. It's like you're trying to reward, and also you're trying to sometimes punish or avoid specific reactions from the players.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot. Like sometimes also there's something that we call emergent mechanics, emergent systems, and things like that, which are systems that we did not create. We did not intend
Oh,
for
like
them to
I
be.
think I know of a good example. Do you know the Super
the-
Smash Brothers melee scene, Pedro?
Yes, a little bit, a little bit.
Okay, so I think that's a
But
very
yeah,
easy.
I know what you are going to talk about.
For the
yeah.
viewer, it's a very easy example to understand because those players broke that game in every sense. It was a very simple party game. The players made it one of the most competitive fighting games of all times. There's still to this day Super Smash Brothers Melee professional tournaments. You know,
Exactly. And a lot of that is mechanics and systems that were not intended, but the tool set the game offers you allows the player to use those, and those end up becoming a thing in sequels later. So
yeah.
there is a lot of what Kevin said that we try, but not necessarily the player is going to do. So we try to dictate a certain behavior, but sometimes we also make games with that sandbox sense, right?
Exactly.
We give a
Perfect.
tool set and
Yeah.
the player do whatever.
Yeah, you give the
Yeah.
player like a physics engine, and they can
Yeah.
just fuck
yeah.
around with it. Okay, perfect.
Garry's Mod.
I
Like
I think that
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's one of them. I think that's one of my favorite things about design is emergent design. Like you have an intention, and then on the way, these things rise like out of nowhere, and you're like, "Whoa, interesting." These are like other ideas that we can kind of take and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, a lot of design in games actually happens like that. Sometimes you're designing something that is completely unrelated, but in the process of designing and implementing that, you find some stuff that is so much better that you end up sometimes even remaking the whole game or even creating a whole new project on top of that.
Perfect.
know?
Uh-huh.
So-
Well, I do think that
100%.
on one side, we can say that maybe players are not the best at like giving feedback, communication, not only considering the channels of communication, but also just thinking about how specific, eloquent, articulate you can be with your feedback and how important it is or how accurate, appropriate it is to the context of what you're trying to look for. We can definitely say that players are very good at like engaging with that emerging design, for sure. It is it comes up so naturally in most experiences, at least gaming experiences. So yeah. Okay, last topic that I want to tackle here today. Obviously, with everything that happens with Wilds, we have talked about trust, we have talked about good faith with companies, and the way that the public interacts sometimes with the industry, with the companies that make games. It's a bit difficult not to think on these current interesting thing, this movement that has been happening for a while now, but it has had a resurgence thanks to a whole wave of content creators addressing this topic, and that would be Stop Killing Games. The Stop Killing Games the Stop Killing Games initiative has gained a lot of traction lately, and is probably one of the few things that will at least open the conversation as to what we should do with many of the different malpractices that are going around the industry. But for now, I do want to know, just in general, what are your thoughts on this movement from a developer's perspective?
Kevin, you want to go first because my opinion is likely a bit controversial.
Of course. I honestly don't have a lot of knowledge on it. I don't have a lot of knowledge on it. I've kind of read a little bit on it. I don't know much about it, but generally, from what I understand, it seems to be the start of a process of an initiative that got the signatures for it to not be ignored.
Okay,
Like, that is
if you want me to give you a little bit more context. So Stop Killing Games started because there's a lot of games that basically in their EULAs had different statements and different claims that allowed publishers to effectively take control away from you once they decided to finish service, right? That interaction is not really what they want to change yet, but it's the origin of why they started with this initiative. Stop Killing Games wants to find a way to regulate these weird interactions where publishers can just decide to finish a service, and that takes away your ability, not even your rights. It's your ability to engage, play, or interact with the game in any way. So that's how it started. Does it want to change that specifically? It cannot really make that claim yet, because this is only a petition. A petition is not even able to change anything yet. It's just saying, hey, we want to make you guys, the people in the European Union legislation, we want to make you guys look into this because we think that it needs legislation. And what's interesting about the the petition, specifically with through the mediums that it is being done over there in Europe, is that after getting all the signatures, the European Union has to look into it. It's I'm guessing it's like a civic or public law or something like that. That's more or less what I can tell you about it. So,
I mean, with that particular context,
just one more thing that I wanted to add. The main thing that they are looking to achieve, like if we can dream big, is to have games to be developed in the future. In the future, this is not retroactively. Have games that when they are developed, they can be continued to be played, even if you remove online service. You know?
Okay.
That's the main worry behind it.
Okay. I would say it's an admirable goal. I can see issues regarding IP stuff. I think depending on the company, they're very sensitive about.
Yeah, intellectual property is one of the big ones that is getting in the way of with this.
Yeah, that's my initial reaction, which is wow, some companies are gonna absolutely hate this because they have an image to protect and they have different intellectual properties they want to protect, and giving it off to people so they can kind of do whatever they want with it is something that to me is certain companies are very delicate about. That movement is admirable. It's nice. As someone that plays games, that would be cool. I used to play this game. It's actually back on Steam. They actually brought it back. It's a really bad game. It's called Grand Chase. I don't know if you've ever heard of that game.
Yeah.
I used to play that game as a kid a lot. Wow, I spent way too much time on that game. And I remember when they took it down, I was like, this is so sad. I want to keep playing the game. And they brought it back on Steam, actually. But yeah, I was very sad that 4 out of 10 game I wasn't able to play it.
But that's the thing. If you paid for it and you want to keep playing it, even if they shut down the servers, right? Let's suppose that you can do something about it with a private server or a local server, something like that.
Yeah, something like a Monster Hunter with an F at the end. I don't know.
Something of the like.
But yeah. Again, with the context that you gave me, it sounds pretty good.
Okay, so for you, it's the intentions are good, but the logistics are gonna be iffy, probably.
They're gonna be whoa.
Okay, yeah, not just moderately complicated, but actually very, very difficult.
It's a big thing. It's really big.
And Pedro, why did you say that you had a controversial opinion about this?
I have two opinions on it actually. Like the first opinion, like as a player, as a consumer, is actually pretty positive overall because I feel like the whole idea for the movement, the whole messaging behind it's good. Like we want to keep our games, we want to buy something and be able to access it. Like if I had like an old game that it's part of my childhood, I want to be able to keep playing that game if I have it physically or on a Steam library or something. I want to keep accessing my games and I want to keep playing them. I understand the sentiment. I agree with a lot of it as a consumer. As a developer, when I look at the movement, I start to get a little bit afraid. I know it's just like signatures right now to for something to be taken into account and not like it's not law yet. I know that, right? But we are trying to invite legislators to look at something with a messaging that is not specific. It's like too open to interpretation, right? Uh, and when we look at the European Union and the laws and regulations that are already in place for video games in general, there's a lot of things that are going to be in the way of that, right? That like the European Union like has a lot of protections to DRM, like usually
Yeah.
to the detriment of the consumer, right? And in favor of companies. But that is something that it already exists and it's already regulated, right? But it goes a little beyond that because it's so open to interpretation. The things that are on writing right now on this specific petition that we don't know exactly what playable state would entail for a game, right? We don't know exactly what is going to be the work needed for that to be a thing. One another thing
Yeah.
that is kind of dangerous is there is no distinction between single player, multiplayer, online and offline games. There's no
Oh, do you mean
distinction.
like they don't make that distinction in the petition?
Not necessarily that, but when you look at video games, there's in law, there's no distinction between those things.
Oh, okay,
Games are games,
legally. Perfect.
right? Yeah. So when you put something like that into legislation and regulation talk, you got to understand that every game might be bundled together in that, and that can cause a lot of problems for multiplayer and single player games, right? Because we are not talking about sales practices, we're talking about how games are designed, how games are made. And when we invite
Right.
regulation and regulation into that, I fear for what people are going to end up deciding, because legislators don't know anything about video games and video game development.
Yeah, I think
So
that's probably one of the biggest problems that we're facing right now, and it's the fact that the
yeah,
people that work on legislation wouldn't care less. Like they could not care
yeah,
less about video games. So what? How are they going to make the distinction? Hopefully, and
exactly.
from what I've heard, supposedly these things, if they go through with this, they have to, because it's their job, they have to research the topic and kind of like find those distinctions, supposedly, from what I understand.
Yeah,
But it's a very good point in the end, because it's true that for like people that work in like, they work with other industries, they work with like markets that are a lot more maybe important in the hierarchy of needs, maybe.
yeah.
Games are very, very out there. They are very far off from being like a
Oh yeah, for
necessity.
sure.
So this
And
is
like,
much more about like consumer protection than it is about game development in the end. However,
yeah, yeah,
the conversation will make them get mixed, probably.
exactly. And
Mm,
my main fear, and like I don't have like an objective thing to say that this will happen, but my fear is the worst case scenario. They add a lot of things that will make compliance with any regulation a nightmare and expensive, and we will end up making, for big companies, it would just like be another cost that they probably will just reflect that cost on the consumer, right? The games will be more expensive.
Yeah. Okay.
For medium and smaller developers, it might be a thing of like a game not being made anymore, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
and I can't say that's going to happen for sure, but things are so like up in the air right now that is my fear, you know. It may not
Actually,
happen. It may be just something like, okay, it's completely ignored and nothing changed. Or the best case scenario, we get our games as our actual possessions and not just licenses that we use.
Yeah.
Best case scenario would be that.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
don't know. And that's where I kind of have a little bit of fear about this. And another thing that it's a small thing, but whenever I ask you or look for information regarding like, okay, what this entails and how much work this will end up being for the developer. And the only thing I see people say is like, oh no, it's not going to be hard. It's going to be easy if you start development with that in mind. Okay, but what is that I have to be in mind specifically?
Okay.
Oh, it's
Yes.
going to be easy. Like, okay, so I will have to figure it out. So nobody knows if it actually is going to be easy.
Well, I guess
You know?
that's
So
one of like the consequences of having this industry operating under this same principle for so long. Is that now that we
yeah,
want to make a change, we don't even have the grounds to work from. Kev, you want to say
yeah,
something?
yeah. The more the conversation keeps going, the more I kind of think about things, and I'm like, okay, so let's say it's an online game, and support ended. It's like you're gonna have to keep supporting it though now, like from a community manager standpoint.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems that that they have addressed that. I mean, at least Ross has mentioned that it's not that they want companies to keep support there. Even though, like my dream, for example, I think this could be something so like cool to do from a community perspective, is to like relegate support for online services to the community, and they have to figure out how they can kind of like finance that. I think that could be cool.
yeah,
But again, it's like also very, very. I feel like it could be a potential hazard, because then how do we know if companies don't want to then like take advantage of people by charging extra or whatever? That's
yeah,
not the point.
yeah,
The thing is, Ross has mentioned that they cannot really make companies have like the support sustained after they want to end the service. This is why they say we need the game in a workable state. Specifically like
yeah,
that, and it sounds vague, but they have to say it like that, because otherwise companies will think, oh, okay, so you want me to continue like online service, and it's like, no, 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 we will figure that out, right? But the game has to be operable. Otherwise, I cannot even start trying to do that. That's kind of like the
Okay.
dynamic there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that just shows you how much I've been delving into it.
No, you're fine. I still want to know like what's your like just your impressions from a game developer's perspective. For me, it's like this is super educational. Anyways, anything else to say?
No, not really. Like this point, like Kev brought up, has been addressed, but it's probably not the last time we are going to hear about this specific
sure,
point as
yeah.
well, because there's one thing that I know a lot of companies will complain about is that, okay, even if we don't necessarily support and allow the players to keep it alive, that IP is ours. And depending on what they do with that game, and I don't know, maybe some big controversy comes up with that game being
Yeah.
supported by the community,
Who's gonna be responsible
that
for
will come back to haunt the company that made it.
Yeah, you
So
got a point.
I know
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of discussion about that still.
You
That
know, my
yeah,
partner, my partner works in community management for games,
yeah,
and that was the exact thing that they told me about. It's like it's the fact that giving
Interesting.
control giving control to the community is like very dangerous in the IP sense. Like they might do things that are against like the practices of the company, and then the whole responsibility falls on the company. So it doesn't even matter if the game isn't like, yeah, you don't have to support it that way, but you will have to support it in other ways,
It's
like
still your
managing
IP.
it's still your IP. So
Yeah.
it's complicated. Like,
Well,
I know I said I hadn't dove into it, but that comment that Pedro made jogged my memory, and I remember that my partner actually like told me that the other day.
For sure. Well, there's another thing that I kind of want to ask you guys. Let's put this from another perspective. Would you rather have this conversation actually start to happen, or would you rather have things stay the same?
If it's that just those two options, I would like the conversation to keep going. But the ideal thing for me would be for that conversation to have happened before amongst the players and the people that are fronting that movement, with more people that are on the industry, like that are vocal on the industry, that show themselves, that talk about it, and then after that we'll probably would have a better draft for this petition. But I feel today like a lot of the conversation gets like muffled by the support. Like if you bring up any point, you will get a lot of backlash. If
You mean
bring
like any
point
contra arguments?
any contra arguments right now, you get a lot of backlash. And I feel like there is no conversation, like that's no like auto criticism from within the movement. It might not be the case. There might be a lot of conversation from the inside, but we don't see that. And when I see people bring up something, they get a lot of backlash. So
No, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I do think that you have a point there, because my theory as to why this originated from a more of a player perspective, right? Ross being a guy that basically, started this whole thing. I feel like he sees things from the player perspective, and he was not seeing anybody discuss this more, right? If you look at it from a developer's perspective, you get into the industry, and then it's like, okay, I'm here. I'm glad that I could be working for this thing, because it's also very difficult to make it. So you don't really question things too much either. That would be my theory, but we cannot really tell. Now, if you're interested, Pedro, anyway, I'm not sure if you know Luis Rossmann. It's a YouTube channel about like right to repair, a right to repair campaign that it also has to do with like consumer rights. In his case, you know about him?
I know a bit. I didn't look too much into him, but I've heard about him before.
Yeah, so he has an episode where he, has a whole podcast with Ross, the guy who is. It's kind of funny that they have this. They have like a similarity in name.
Yeah.
They have a podcast, and Lewis brings a game developer into the conversation so that they can do comments and things on that as well, and in case you want to like look more into that. But anyway, I do want to thank you, because I think this, for me, it's always like positive to be able to have actual conversation and to go back and forth between like the pros, the cons, what could be expected that is good, what could be expected that is not so good in anything, to be honest. So I highly appreciate these like points of view.
And yet again, OVS decided to betray me. The recording didn't save the last segment of the podcast, but Kevin and Pedro had a really wholesome message for you guys by the end of it. I know that this will most likely fail to represent their exact words, but if there's something that they really wanted to put out there, was this simple message. People who love games want to play more games and want to make more games. There's a strange environment in the industry today, but they really wish that conversations like the ones that happened in this podcast could happen more often. For in the end, developers are also gamers, and they want to share what they do with the rest of the world. It is up to us, the players, to meet them halfway, so that they can keep making great games. We have more in common than what you would think. Lastly, as I said at the beginning of the video, the Curious Hunter series is expanding. And no, this doesn't mean that I will stop making content for Monster Hunter. In fact, there's so many videos down the line that I want to make and I just cannot work fast enough or find enough time to make them. However, I never saw myself as just a Monster Hunter fan. I'm a video game fan. I think in a lot of ways they are an incredible amalgamation of art and a window to an experience that you cannot find anywhere else. And as such, there's so much I want to say about games in general. So don't be surprised if I make videos for other games as well. Not only for the sake of games, but also for the sake of my own creative outlet. If you'd watched this video up until now, I really cannot thank you enough. There's one thing that would really help me in my journey as a content creator. If you have the time, please share this video with anyone you think could also like it, since I feel this conversation was much needed for the community and it is incredibly educational for people who want to know more about the industry. Again, thank you so much. As always, my name is Sun, and until next time.